Chapter 1554, His Highness Mu Hong. Chapter 1554, His Highness Mu Hong. On the peak of ancient Demon Mountain in the Black Palace. Swoosh, swoosh. The old lady in a black robe and the chubby, middle-aged man appeared simultaneously. The old lady in a black robe looked extremely solemn, while the chubby, middle-aged man looked miserable. He was covered in blood, and his aura was extremely weak. What happened? His Highness Mu Hong creased his eyebrows and asked, "Your Highness, the experts that barged into Blood Demon Church this time should be coming for us. They have 3 real gods fighting against the people of Blood Demon Church on the surface, but they have 1 chaotic real god who came here," the chubby, middle-aged man said. "Chaotic real god?" His Highness Mu Hong said. "Master," the old lady in a black robe looked at Lord Lung and said politely, "There are 2 of them who barged into my formation. One of them is a chaotic real god, while another, if I'm not mistaken, should be the top genius from lineage of Star, who is extremely famous, Jian Wushuang." Lord Lung, who had been sitting down at ease, her body suddenly quivered when she heard Jian Wushuang's name. There was a glimpse of an unnoticeable expression in her eyes. Jian Wushuang? The 3rd place on Universe God ranking list? His Highness Mu Hong's face grew cold. Yes, it's him. Jian Wushuang is really monstrous. He is only a universe god, but even I had to put in some effort to deal with him. I can't do anything about him. His strength might already be able to compare favorably to a peak void, real gods. The lady in a black robe nodded. Humph, how monstrous. If it wasn't because I happened to break through and became a real god at the time, when Wu Bei's cave came to the world, I couldn't have entered Wu Bei's cave. Otherwise, why would the white blaze fruits and white blaze fruit trees fall into his hands? His Highness Mu Hong sneered. The old lady in a black robe heard him and only smiled in silence, but didn't say much. Number 7, what's the situation like? Lord Lung asked. Master, I trapped both the chaotic real god and Jian Wushuang using redstone prison temporarily. However, the chaotic real god is too strong. I'm afraid he will break my redstone prison forcefully in no time. The old lady in a black robe looked solemn. Redstone prison was her strongest trump card. Under normal circumstances, it should be sufficient to trap an ordinary chaotic real god. But the power of real god Long Qing, who was trapped in redstone prison then, definitely wasn't an ordinary chaotic real god. Master, before redstone prison breaks open from the chaotic real god, we'd better leave first, the old lady in a black robe said. Your Highness, hurry up and leave too, the chubby, middle-aged man said anxiously. He was already severely injured by the chaotic real god, and he had barely any fighting power left. What's the hurry? His Highness Mu Hong said in a low voice, I've heard about Jian Wushuang for more than once. I heard that he is the top genius standing at the peak of eternal chaotic world. I wanted to fight against him long ago. Now that I have the chance, how can I miss it? But the chubby, middle-aged man wanted to say something. Shut up, His Highness Mu Hong reprimanded him. Then he looked at Lord Lung with a faint smile. Lung, wait for me here for a while. I'll be right back. Lord Lung nodded faintly. His Highness Mu Hong left the palace with the chubby, middle-aged man. Number 7, Lord Lung commanded, you follow them. Remember, you only have to deal with the chaotic real god. As for Jian Wushuang, let His Highness Mu Hong deal with him on his own. Yes, the old lady in a black robe nodded, then she disappeared in the palace again. In the Black Palace, there's only Lord Lung sitting alone in silence. On Lord Lung's face, which was covered with a veil, there was a malicious smile. She rubbed her stomach involuntarily with her delicate hand. There was a consciousness in deep sleep. She had sealed off the consciousness long ago with all the tricks she had on hand. Sister, your sweetheart is so stubborn. He really chased after you from green fire world to eternal chaotic world. In merely 10,000 years, he became so famous. He's really outstanding. No wonder you're so into him. It's a pity that his heart is with you. Otherwise, your younger sister, me, would be quite attracted to him. Lord Lung muttered to herself. Her voice was so ghostly and creepy. Jian Wushuang, as you're here, let me take a good look at your capability. In the huge red stone prison that covered the vast universe, Jian Wushuang and real god Long Qing were trapped in the prison. They couldn't break it apart in a short period of time. Then, His Highness Mu Hong, the chubby, middle-aged man, and the old lady in a black robe appeared in a corner of the red stone prison. Your Highness Mu Hong, Jian Wushuang is at the end of this passageway. Just walk along the passageway ahead, and you'll see him. I'll have to deal with a chaotic real god, so I'll not keep you company. The old lady in a black robe bowed, and then plunged in the direction of real god Long Qing. In the passageway in Redstone Prison, His Highness Mu Hong stood side by side with the chubby, middle-aged man. Your Highness, I fought with a chaotic real god earlier and got severely injured. Not even 10% of my power has recovered yet, and Jian Wushuang isn't weak. What if the chubby, middle-aged man had yet to finish what he wanted to say? What do you mean by what if? Your Highness Mu Hong glared at the chubby, middle-aged man. Lung is waiting outside as she watches. You want to embarrass me before her? The chubby, middle-aged man's face changed, but he never spoke again. Humph, he's just a universe god. Even if he is a genius, just how strong he can be. His Highness Mu Hong had a scornful look. He was pampered since birth, and he had his father as his backer. He had always been riding roughshod over everything and never bothered with anyone, including those geniuses in eternal chaotic world. The most important thing was that he was extremely confident in his power. One should know that he had already broken through and become real God, and he had already comprehended one of the 9 heaven god doctrines, darkness doctrine. Although his comprehension towards darkness doctrine wasn't high and wasn't at the standard of passing the first level of Doctrine Palace, he possessed extremely aggressive real god armor and divine weapons because of his father. On top of that, he had cultivated some secret skills, and his fighting power had already reached the peak of a void real god. With such a fighting power, from his point of view, no matter how amazing a universe god was, he would be able to win against him. Don't be in a hurry to fight with him directly. Let my 2 war puppets play with him first. His Highness Mu Hong smirked coldly. He waved, and 2 tall figures appeared before him. They were 2 war puppets of void god level. Under the guidance of His Highness Mu Hong, the 2 war puppets plunged ahead in the passageway. Chapter 1555, A Great Change. Chapter 1555, A Great Change. At one of the passages within the red stone prison, Jian Wushuang had an icy cold expression. As he held the Blood Mountain sword on his right hand, he walked forward slowly, and his eyes remained vigilant regarding his surroundings at all times. He had already attempted to break open the red stone prison moments ago. However, he discovered that he did not have the ability to do so, as he could not even break open the stone wall, which was beside him. Without any choice, he could only follow the passage in front of him and continue walking slowly. Although this prison is sturdy, it was still created by an eternal real god. With real god Long Qing's abilities, he should be able to break out in a short while, Jian Wushuang thought to himself. At that moment, at the front of the passage, two big shadows appeared in front of him. Battle puppets. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Void real god-level battle puppets. The two battle puppets were each holding a saber on their hands. Their icy cold, unfeeling eyes had also locked onto Jian Wushuang firmly. In the next moment, the two big shadows moved at the same time. Boom, boom. Two frightening power burst forth abruptly. Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold, and he unleashed his martial art motion instantly. Back then, when he was traveling in Wu Bei's cave, his martial art motion had been recognized as the #1 among the universe gods. Moreover, at that time, his comprehension of the space-time doctrine was only at the beginner's level. After leaving Wu Bei's cave, a total of 1,800 years had passed. During the 1,800 years, with the help of the real God Hall, his comprehension of the space-time doctrine had improved greatly. At that very moment, it had also achieved the standard necessary to clear the first level of the Doctrine Palace. Moreover, the secret skill-flowing light phantom was also controlled by the power of space-time. The higher the comprehension of space-time doctrine, the more frightening his martial art motion was. At that very moment, when Jian Wushuang had unleashed his martial art motion again, it was a lot stronger than back then when he had unleashed it in Wu Bei's cave. Swish, swish, among the 18 shadows. When the two of them were near the two battle puppets, both of them did an action mimicking a sword swing. The two battle puppets also took out their sabers instantly and swung them with their great power. At once, the swings became shrill saber light, which struck Jian Wushuang's body. However, it was obvious that what they had struck was merely a phantom. As for Jian Wushuang, his real body unleashed a random stroke, which was like an arc of light, and he struck the necks of the two battle puppets easily. Two heads were then sent flying immediately. Without their heads, the two battle puppets collapsed at once. Clap, clap. Clapping sounds could be heard. When Jian Wushuang raised his head to take a look, he saw that His Highness Wushuang and the fat middle-aged were walking toward him slowly. As expected of the top genius who is able to rank third on the universe god ranking list, these two demon god puppets of mine actually possessed the fighting capabilities of void real gods. However, they were destroyed by you instantly. His Highness Wushuang giggled. However, he was still a bit amazed. Oh! Jian Wushuang stared at the two of them, especially the fat middle-aged man. His expression could not help but change, but he heaved a sigh of relief after that. It's still all right. This eternal real god has been seriously injured by real god Qing just now. Hence, he should not be able to unleash much of his fighting capabilities. Jian Wushuang was still extremely fearful of the eternal real gods. As for His Highness Wushuang, Jian Wushuang could tell that he was only at the level of a void god. Hence, he was not too afraid. Jian Wushuang, today I really wish to see exactly how strong a top genius like you, who is on the universe god ranking list, is. His Highness Wushuang laughed coldly. Without saying many unnecessary words, a green sickle appeared in his hands. The edge of the green sickle was extremely small but sharp. Under the illumination of the red stones around the area, the green sickle emitted an icy cold dark red luster. Jian Wushuang held the blood mountain sword in his hands tightly. "Haha, let's fight." His Highness Wushuang laughed coldly, and with a movement of his feet, the green sickle changed into a green glittering light and proceeded to attack with lightning speed. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Many green saber lights seemed to descend at the same time, and they shrouded Jian Wushuang instantly. Jian Wushuang released the divine power in his hands and also activated the secret skill of the blood feather reincarnation armor completely. After that, the Blood Mountain sword attacked straight away. Clang! Even though it was only the first clash, Jian Wushuang's expression changed. What strength! He has probably achieved the peak of a void real god. There were both strong and weak void real gods. The weak ones were the very normal void real gods, and normally the top 30 of the universe god ranking list could compete with them. As for the top 10 on the universe god ranking list, they could kill the void real gods. However, there were also void real gods who had comprehended a small bit of the power of Heaven Way. With that, their abilities were no longer normal. As for the top of the void real gods, normally their comprehension of the power of Heaven Way would allow them to clear the first level of the Doctrine Palace. One such example was the Fiery King, who was a peak void real god. However, for His Highness Wushuang, who was in front of him, although his comprehension of the power of Heaven Way was not very high due to some secret skills as well as the treasures that he possessed, he could also unleash the fighting capabilities of a peak void real god. Haha, Jian Wushuang, why have you been on the defensive ever since we started fighting? Come on, show me your moves. Or could it be that you have been pushed back by me so much that you are unable to counterattack? His Highness Wushuang laughed loudly and swung the green sickle in his hands continuously. Every swing held a great amount of power and pushed Jian Wushuang back to the point that he had to retreat continuously. However, although Jian Wushuang was retreating continuously, his eyes remained icy cold and his expression did not show any fear. Although this person possesses the fighting capabilities of a peak void real god, he does not have much experience in close-quarters combat. Jian Wushuang's eyes squinted slightly. At the next moment, his body moved, and he unleashed the secret skill-flowing light phantom as well as his unusual martial art motion at the same time. Jian Wushuang's ghost-like body avoided the saber lights that His Highness Wushuang unleashed easily, and he appeared in front of His Highness Wushuang. 10,000 shadows. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. A huge number of sword shadows appeared at the same time. Under the influence of Jian Wushuang's power of space-time, every sword shadow was unbelievably fast. What? His Highness Wushuang's expression changed slightly, and he swung his green sickle immediately to block. His body was also forced to retreat. Jian Wushuang stood in his position, and a small bit of disdain flashed past his eyes. Seems like I have overestimated him. Although he indeed has the fighting capabilities of a peak void real god, his close-quarter combat abilities are too weak. While he has the abilities, he is unable to unleash them completely. Jian Wushuang sneered, I shall stop wasting my time on him and kill him directly. Jian Wushuang glowed with murderous intent. In a split second, an enormous amount of soul power burst forth, and a giant golden divine ape covered his body. His divine power and soul power had combined beautifully. With that, Jian Wushuang's abilities had achieved their peak. Next, Jian Wushuang was about to launch his attack. However, all of a sudden, an unusual change occurred. Boom! Jian Wushuang felt as if he had been struck by a streak of lightning from a clear sky. His body paused at his position, and his heart was beating madly. This is, of all times, why must it be now? No. Jian Wushuang roared within his mind, and his expression also became unusually ugly. He had never expected this to happen. At the critical moment, where he was in the red stone prison, which was very close to Lung Rushua, his inverse cultivation test for the third heaven actually descended without any warning. Chapter 1556. The third inverse cultivation test is here. Chapter 1556. The third inverse cultivation test is here. Inverse cultivation test. It was the biggest test that Jian Wushuang had to pass as an inverse cultivator. He had experienced 2 inverse cultivation tests previously and passed them in extreme danger. Among the 2 inverse cultivation tests, when the first inverse cultivation test had descended, there were signs 120 years before that had allowed him to prepare for 120 years. For the second inverse cultivation test, the signs had come 10 years before the test. He at least got to prepare for 10 years. But then, the third inverse cultivation test, there wasn't any sign, nor did it give any time for Jian Wushuang to prepare himself. It didn't even worry about what kind of situation Jian Wushuang was in and descended directly. It suddenly descended as he was fighting against His Highness Mu Hong. Why now? Why didn't even give me any time to prepare? I don't need much. One day, it'd be great, even if it was only 2 hours. Jian Wushuang roared from the bottom of his heart. Lung Rushue was within a stone's throw away from him. He only needed a little bit of time, and he'd be able to see Lung Rushue. He then would figure a way to suppress her. But out of all moments, the third inverse cultivation test had descended at this critical time. However, the inverse cultivation test was different from the previous 2. There weren't any clouds. From the outside, Jian Wushuang didn't see changes, but only he knew that he was in the process of going through the test. Jian Wushuang, die! His Highness Mu Hong's eyes were cold with a tinge of murderous intention. He raised the green sickle high. Wow! A huge blade light appeared. Then the air burst from the pressure and became a luxurious blade river. Jian Wushuang's face dimmed as he saw the luxurious blade river flowing towards him. Blood Mountain Sword in his hand immediately became a bolt of crimson lightning and suddenly swept out. Just as the sword light swept out, Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted. My divine power is weakening. There was a loud bang, and Jian Wushuang retreated from the impact. Ha ha! His Highness Mu Hong laughed as he wielded his sickle and charged towards Jian Wushuang ferociously. The blade lights swung out from his hand. He obviously wanted to crush Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang immediately wielded his sword to block with all his strength. However, during the process, Jian Wushuang could clearly feel that his divine power was constantly weakening. Not only in terms of divine power, it included his soul power, his comprehension towards reincarnation doctrine, space-time doctrine, and even sword principle that he had created, but they were also all weakening tremendously. How could it be? Jian Wushuang was shocked and angry. If he were to be at his tip-top condition, when he collaborates his divine power with soul power to give full play to his power, he could totally defeat His Highness Mu Hong easily. He could even kill him. But then his power was deteriorating at a terrifying speed. From fighting forcefully with His Highness Mu Hong to barely evenly matching to being at a disadvantage. It only took an instant. Then Jian Wushuang was almost losing. Regardless of speed or strength, he was far behind His Highness Mu Hong. Looking at His Highness wielding his sickle again and again, even though Jian Wushuang had blocked the blade light, Jian Wushuang was retreating at every collision due to the fierce impact. Crushing him, it was almost torture. The genius in the top 10 on Universe God ranking list, your ability is just like this. Weak, too weak. Jian Wushuang, I overestimated your power. His Highness Mu Hong was holding his green sickle with one hand as he overlooked Jian Wushuang coldly. There was disdain in his eyes. I previously wondered just how amazing a top genius in Universe God ranking list could be, but from what I see now, you're only rubbish. Your kind is not worth my attention. Die. His Highness Wushuang let out a green glow, and the murderous intention suddenly surfaced from his body. Jian Wushuang's face changed. Just then, hum, a terrifying loud roar was suddenly heard from a corner of Redstone Prison. Then, the originally sturdy Redstone Prison that even Jian Wushuang at his peak could damage started trembling. The surrounding red stone walls started cracking. In a short while, walala, the Redstone Prison collapsed. Humph, your prison is pretty impressive, but it's not enough to trap me, Long Qing. A cold harumph suddenly exploded in the universe. Then, they immediately saw a fierce divine power explode in a corner of the void and fly in all directions. The old lady in a black robe, who was dealing with real god Long Qing, with her all looked terrified. At the moment when real god Long Qing broke Redstone Prison apart. Hurry up and run. The old lady in a black robe let out a low roar, and her figure instantly retreated. Your Highness, let's hurry up and leave. The chubby, middle-aged man appeared before His Highness Wushuang. But Jian Wushuang, His Highness Wushuang glanced at Jian Wushuang. He wanted to kill Jian Wushuang before he left. Hurry up and run. Otherwise, we won't escape in time. The chubby, middle-aged man immediately grabbed His Highness Wushuang by his hand. Then, the two of them instantly fled. Rumble! A terrifying divine power pressed from all directions, and the ruins of the collapsed Redstone Prison were crushed into pieces. Then, there was a figure that soared up into the sky. It was real god Long Qing, and he was raging with imposing aura. Looking at the few people fleeing hastily in the void, he wanted to chase, but he suddenly noticed Jian Wushuang's existence. Jian Wushuang, you are... Real god Long Qing looked at Jian Wushuang with his eyebrows tightly knitted. He could tell that Jian Wushuang was in very bad condition. Jian Wushuang's divine power and aura were already weakened to an extreme low, and it was constantly weakening still. Jian Wushuang felt that all his strength was vanishing. He sat on the ground with his body slightly shivering. He couldn't move an inch. But suddenly, Jian Wushuang lifted his head and roared, Real god Long Qing, don't bother about me. Hurry! Hurry up and chase after them. Remember, you must catch the lady in ancient Demon Mountain alive. Catch her alive. Real god Long Qing creased his eyebrows and nodded heavily. Then, just as real god Long Qing plunged out and almost stepped foot on ancient Demon Mountain, Virum! A boundless black fog suddenly soared up from ancient Demon Mountain, just like a black ocean. It instantly swept across heaven and earth and covered the entire universe. Wow, wow, wow. From the black ocean, an enormous amount of black fog formed into creepy black waves and lapped at real god Long Qing from all directions. Although real god Long Qing was a chaotic real god, he seemed to be in a fix from the attack of the creepy black waves. What the hell is this? Real god Long Qing's gaze turned cold, and he constantly stabbed with his spear as he let out an imposing power to break the black waves. However, the moment it broke, more black waves ravaged over. Chapter 1557, very close. Chapter 1557, very close. Damn it! Real god Long Qing was extremely furious. With a stab of his long spear abruptly, the strong fighting capabilities of a chaotic real god burst forth, and it was as if even the heavens could be pierced. As for the vast Black Sea, 10% of it was annihilated by that stab instantly. However, it returned to normal quickly, and the great black waves continued to head toward him madly like before. Without question, the Black Sea was even more troublesome than the Redstone Prison had been previously. At that very moment, at the center of the Black Sea, which was also the peak of the ancient demon mountain, a white-clothed woman's body appeared slowly. Her white clothes were whiter than snow, and her face was covered with a veil. She looked just like a celestial beauty from a painting, and she was walking out slowly. Even though her looks could not be seen clearly, the special coldness and elegance of her were sufficient to make everything in the world be visibly moved. As for Jian Wushuang, who was sitting on the ground, he raised his head fiercely. His sharp eyes then locked on to the white-clothed woman at once. "Long Rushua." Even Jian Wushuang's voice was trembling. However, he still felt delighted and furious. He was delighted as he had finally found his wife after being separated for so many years. He was furious as his wife's body was being controlled by Long Rushua at that very moment. As Jian Wushuang stared at the white-clothed woman, the white-clothed woman was also examining him closely. "Jian Wushuang, long time no see." The white-clothed woman, Long Zunju's voice could be heard. "After so many years, you still didn't give up. You are really persistent. I have said before, even if you walk to the end of the world, I will still be able to find you," Jian Wushuang said coldly. "Yes, you have found me. However, what can you do even though you have found me?" Long Zunju sneered. "Do you have the ability to suppress me? Look at your miserable state now. If not for me being worried about some agreements that I made with her back then, and the fact that she might create some trouble for me in the future if I didn't keep my promise, I would actually act now and kill you straight away." The she who Long Zunju mentioned was naturally referring to the consciousness of Long Wushuang, who had been sealed by her. Upon hearing Long Zunju's words, Jian Wushuang was shocked, and he could not help but clench both his fists tightly. He then spoke with a low voice. "I might not be able to do anything against you today. However, I will still repeat myself. Even if you walk to the end of the world, no matter how long it takes, 1,000,000 years or even 10 million years, as long as I, Jian Wushuang, am not dead, I will do my utmost best to find and suppress you. There will surely come a day where I help her to take back what belongs to her." "Haha, is that so?" Long Zunju laughed evilly, and her eyes squinted slightly. "Very good. I'll be waiting. Let's go." Long Zunju turned her body and left with His Highness Mu Song and the rest of the people. Damn it! As for Jian Wushuang, he raised his head and stared at the back view of Long Zunju closely as she left. His heart was quivering and roaring madly to release all his dissatisfaction. He had finally found Long Rushua. Long Rushua was just standing in front of him. She was extremely close to him. However, he could not act to suppress Long Rushua and rescue his wife. He could only look on as Long Rushua left. Although she was so close, she was still out of reach. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang had already neglected the fact that he was still in the midst of the inverse cultivation test for the third heaven. He also didn't know what kind of unbelievable change was occurring inside his own body. But as Long Zunju and her people disappeared from Jian Wushuang and real God Long Qing's line of vision, the Black Sea, which had spread all over the universe, started to dissipate slowly. Real God Long Qing was finally freed from the Black Sea. His eyes were filled with seriousness as he looked in the direction that Long Zunju left in. Who exactly was that woman just now? At the very moment, real God Long Qing felt very uneasy. Even though her realm is not high, and she seems to have not even reached the level of an eternal real God, the technique that she used just now caused even me to be fearful. Moreover, what exactly is the move that she used? Although he had stayed in the Black Sea for quite a while, he was still unable to tell how the Black Sea was formed. Although it looked like a realm treasure, that was not it. It also didn't look like a secret skill that was executed by relying on her divine power. Instead, it was another special kind of power. And Lung Zunju possessed such a power. Jian Wushuang wants me to suppress her. If it were close-quarters combat, even if it were me, I couldn't guarantee that I could defeat her. Hence, it is absolutely impossible to capture her alive. Real God Long Qing shook his head. After that, he turned his body and headed in the direction of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang. Real God Long Qing had appeared in front of Jian Wushuang, and he was about to talk to him. What is it? All of a sudden, real God Long Qing became stunned. As he stared at Jian Wushuang closely, his face was filled with astonishment and disbelief. How did you become like this? Inside the Blood Demon Church, at that very moment, the Blood Demon Church was too tragic to look at. 3 real gods, of which 2 were eternal real gods, charged in and unleashed a killing spree wantonly. Although the real gods of the Blood Demon Church had given their all to repel them, they could not do anything as the gap between their abilities was too big. For example, the Blood Demon Church Master had only just become an eternal real god. As for real God Baiying and real God Yin Tuo, they were at a peak level when compared to the other eternal real gods. Hence, among the both of them, either one of them could suppress the Blood Demon Church Master easily. In addition, there was still the Fiery King, who was a void real god, who stood at the top. Therefore, he crushed the higher-ups of the Blood Demon Church directly. Even the Blood Demon Church Master escaped tragically straight away. As for the 3 void real gods in the Blood Demon Church, 2 of them were killed on the spot, while the other one escaped with serious injuries. As for the universe gods, who were the higher-ups of the Blood Demon Church, Fiery King, and the rest of the party did not let them off either. As such, many of them were killed. In any case, the Blood Demon Church was finished. As for the universe god disciples within the church, all of them had already escaped outside the sect. In the very moment, real God Baiying, real God Yin Tuo, and the Fiery King were heading toward the direction of the ancient demon mountain. While traveling, the 3 of them were chatting with one another as well. In the beginning, the Blood Demon Church Master was still quite arrogant. After knowing that we have a lineup of 2 eternal real gods and a void real god, he still bragged that he would make us stay in the Blood Demon Church forever. I really wonder where he got his courage from. At the start, I still thought that the Blood Demon Church had some sort of trump card. In the end, they had nothing but the Blood Demon Church Master boasting outrageously. However, it's a pity. In the end, we still allowed the Blood Demon Church Master to escape. The 3 of them felt that it was a pity. The Blood Demon Church Master had done all kinds of evil. Hence, when they had acted this time round, they had planned to completely eliminate the Blood Demon Church. However, in the end, they did not manage to do what they had wanted. However, in actual fact, they didn't know that the Blood Demon Church Master was not bragging previously. He had really wanted to get the 3 of them to stay forever. The basis was that His Highness Wushuang and Lung Zunju were willing to help him. However, in the end, His Highness Wushuang and Lung Zunju had never paid any attention to him. As such, he had escaped, as he could not do anything. I wonder how real God Long Qing and Jian Wushuang are doing. With real God Long Qing, a chaotic real god, going there personally, there will definitely be no problem. While chatting with one another, the 3 of them arrived at the place where Jian Wushuang and real God Long Qing were in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1558, Gray-haired Jian Wushuang. Chapter 1558, Gray-haired Jian Wushuang. Real God Long Qing, real God Baiying, Real God Yin Tuo and Fiery King lowered themselves. Why are only you here? Where's Jian Wushuang? Fiery King was the first who asked. Jian Wushuang. He's there. Real God Long Qing beckoned to the ground below. The three of them then noticed the figure on the ground below. From that one glance, Real God Baying, Real God Yin Tuo, and Fiery King were shocked. He's Jian Wushuang? Real God Baying was shocked. How is it possible? From his aura, it is really him, Real God Yin Tuo exclaimed in surprise. While Fiery King's face grew dim. The three of them could see the figure on the ground below, but the figure had gray hair, a hoary look, and his body was like a withered tree. It was just like an elderly who had reached old age. On top of that, the gray-haired elderly had no fluctuation of divine power at all. He was just like a common person, a total commoner. The gray-haired common elder was one of the members widely recognized in Eternal Chaotic World, Jian Wushuang. Swoosh! Fiery King was the first to plunge down and appear before the gray-haired elderly. It was as though he had felt Fiery King's arrival. The gray-haired elderly lifted his head slightly and revealed a face that looked like Jian Wushuang's, but obviously a few times older. The face was hoary, and he could barely force a smile at Fiery King. Jian Wushuang, it's really you? Fiery King's eyes were wide open. Even though there was a drastic change in Jian Wushuang's appearance, the fluctuation of divine power vanished. The aura was extremely weak. The nature of the weak aura was really one that he was familiar with. Fiery King was definite that the gray-haired elderly was really Jian Wushuang. Why did you become like this? Fiery King's face grew grave, and his voice was low. At the same time, he glanced at Real God Long Qing. Real God Long Qing, weren't you with Jian Wushuang the whole time? Why did you let him turn into such a condition? Fiery King was hot-tempered, and Jian Wushuang did good grace to him. Looking at Jian Wushuang's condition, he didn't worry about if Real God Long Qing was a chaotic real god, but reprimanded him. However, Real God Long Qing only creased his eyebrows slightly. Brother Fiery King, Jian Wushuang, who had become a gray-haired elderly, spoke. His voice was hoarse and weak. This has nothing to do with Real God Long Qing. He did his best. The reason why I became like this is due to my personal body condition. Personal body condition? Fiery King squinted his eyes. Let's forget about this. We barged into Blood Demon Church and made a huge scene. We may have already startled Real God, Jiu Gong. Hence, it's best we leave here first, Jian Wushuang said. All right, Fiery King answered. Real God Long Qing, Real God Baying, and Real God Yin Tuo nodded heavily in agreement. Brother Fiery King, please lend me a hand. Jian Wushuang suddenly extended his hand. His hand was hoary too, and his skin was so dry that it cracked. I have no divine power at all. I can't even travel. I can only ask Brother Fiery King to give me a ride. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Fiery King felt a tug at his heartstrings, and his gaze at Jian Wushuang was filled with sympathy. Very soon, the five of them departed. However, Jian Wushuang was on Fiery King's back. On the way, Jian Wushuang never spoke. As for Fiery King, Real God Long Qing, and the rest were in silence. No one spoke. However, not long after they had traveled from Blood Demon Church, Virum, a ferocious power, suddenly descended. Then there was immediately a 3-meter-tall figure. A giant-like elderly in a purple robe appeared in the void from nowhere. Looking at the elderly in a purple robe, the few of them who were originally traveling forward suddenly stopped as their eyes contracted in shock. Greetings to Mr. Jiu Gong from Long Qing. real god Long Qing bowed, slightly before the elderly in a purple robe. It's real god Jiogong. We're in trouble. Real god Bai Ying, real god Yin Tuo, and Fiery King were terrified. Jian Wushuang, who was on Fiery King's back, couldn't help but lift his head to steal a glance at the elderly in a purple robe. Real god Jiogong was the king of Jiogong, Holy Kingdom. At the same time, Lineage of Star was fearful of him. They didn't dare to send any real gods from their sect to Jiogong Holy King. He was a superb expert on the 5th place on Real God ranking list. Although real god Long Qing was a chaotic real god compared to real god Jiogong, he was far behind. When they met, just like then, real god Long Qing had to refer to real god Jiogong as Mr. Real god Long Qing, the extermination of Blood Demon Church, is your doing? Real god Jiogong stood there with his cold voice and asked in a calm manner, but every word he uttered hammered the few of their hearts brutally. They were all shivering in fear. Such terrifying power. Fiery King clenched his teeth and complimented. Mr. Jiogong, yes, it is our doing. Real god Long Qing replied carefully. Humph Blood Demon Church is one of the forces under the control of Holy Kingdom Jiogong. Before you took action against it, you didn't even inform me. Wasn't that disrespectful to me? Real god Jiogong harumphed coldly, and there was anger in his eyes. This real god Long Qing's face grew grave. He thought for a while, and took out a Tian ring. I am really not considered enough regarding what happened today. There are 20 doctrine gems in this Tian ring. Consider this an apology. Only 20? Real god Jiogong's gaze was cold. 200 doctrine gems, and I'll let the few of you off. Otherwise, none of you will be leaving. 200. Real god Long Qing stunned. Real god Bai Ying and real god Yin Tuo stunned. Doctrine gem was an extremely precious treasure to real gods, as it was very useful. Any ordinary, eternal, real god would only have 10 doctrine gems at most. 200 doctrine gems was also a huge figure to real god Long Qing, who was a chaotic real god. Fine, I'll give them to you. Real god Long Qing threw another Qian Kuan ring out directly. Although 200 doctrine gem wasn't a small amount, real god Long Qing accepted Hall Master Yuan's invitation, and Hall Master Yuan offered him a higher price than that. After real god Jiogong took the Qian Kuan ring, he glanced and nodded, "You can leave now." Fiery King and the rest let out a breath of relief and immediately prepared to leave. But then real god Jiogong suddenly fixed his gaze on Jian Wushuang. Who is this person that didn't even have any fluctuation of divine power? Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat. He knew clearly that if real god Jiogong were to find out his real identity, he couldn't even think about leaving Holy Kingdom Jiogong alive. Fiery King immediately replied, "Mister, this is my relative. Many years ago, he got caught by Blood Demon Church and was tortured. His training was in vain entirely, and he turned into a commoner. I barged into Blood Demon Church today to take revenge and to rescue him." Is that so? Real god Jiogong raised his eyebrows, but didn't suspect. "Let's go," Fiery King, and the rest quickly brought Jian Wushuang with them and left. Chapter 1559, A Shocking Transformation. Chapter 1559, A Shocking Transformation. Real god Long Qing, real god Bai Ying, real god Yin Tuo, and the Fiery King were traveling while carrying Jian Wushuang with them. After some time, they finally left the Jiogong Holy Kingdom's territory. In the Black Void, we have finally come out. Real god Long Qing and the rest of them heaved a sigh of relief. The Jiogong Holy Kingdom had real god Jiogong. As soon as he discovered Jian Wushuang's real identity, even the few of them could not get away scot-free. That real god Qing is really very unreasonable. He actually asked for 200 doctrine gems. Yes, Intua, you and I are both unable to fork out 200 doctrine gems. Only real god Qing is able to do it. Real god Baiying and real god Intua side. Real god Jiogong is known for being unreasonable. Real god Qing said, after all, the Blood Demon Church is a big powerhouse within the Holy Kingdom that he controls. Without getting a green light from him, we destroyed it directly. Moreover, it's already not too bad that he didn't kill all of us straight away. As for the 200 doctrine gems, it's nothing. After sighing for some time, real god Qing looked toward Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, although the mission this time around could not be completed, and that you became like this as well, the three of us had done our best. I know, Jian Wushuang nodded his head, slightly. Thank you, and I'm sorry for troubling the three of you. After I get back, I will explain to Hall Master Yuan clearly. As for the rewards that Hall Master Yuan have promised previously, they will definitely be given in full. Thank you very much. Real god Qing thanked Jian Wushuang. After that, he left with real god Baiying and real god Intua. They only came when they were hired. Since they had already finished what they were supposed to do, they would naturally leave. In the void, only the Fiery King and Jian Wushuang remained. Jian Wushuang, how did you become like this? The Fiery King could not help but ask. In the beginning, he had thought that Jian Wushuang became his current state, as he had been poisoned by a potent poison. However, a great amount of time had passed since traveling from the Blood Demon Church to their current location. Even after that, Jian Wushuang still did not get any better. Hence, the Fiery King was anxious. I'm sorry, Big Brother Fiery King. This matter concerns a few secrets of mine, and it is inconvenient for me to tell you. You only need to send me back to the lineage of Star. At that time, Hall Master Yuan and the rest of the people will help me to resolve this matter, Jian Wushuang said apologetically. All right, the Fiery King nodded his head, and he did not mind. After all, everyone has secrets. Moreover, some secrets were extremely crazy. Hence, he would naturally not get to the bottom of Jian Wushuang's secrets. The Fiery King took out an airship from the outside world. After that, he began his journey to send Jian Wushuang back to the lineage of Star from the Jiogong Holy Kingdom. He took tens of years to return to the lineage of Star. However, even though tens of years had passed, Jian Wushuang still did not get any better. At the lineage of Star, inside a cave that was built with special gems. As Hall Master Yuan and Lei Chao looked in front of them at the white-haired Jian Wushuang, who looked like an old man, their eyes squinted slightly. If not for the special life aura of Jian Wushuang, based on looks alone, they would not expect the person in front of them to actually be Jian Wushuang. Fiery King, thank you for sending Jian Wushuang back this time around. I will make sure that Jian Wushuang remembers this favor, Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang and I belong to the same lineage. Moreover, he has rescued me from the Sky Sword prison, and I am extremely grateful to him for this. Hence, I ought to send him back, and there's nothing with regards to owing or returning favors. Now, the most important thing is his current state. I hope that your lineage of Star is able to think of a way to get him to recover quickly, the Fiery King said. Don't worry. You can leave this matter to the lineage of Star, Hall Master Yuan said. Understood. The Fiery King nodded his head, took a look at Jian Wushuang seriously, and left soon after. Inside the cave, only Hall Master Yuan, Lei Chao, and Jian Wushuang were left. Jian Wushuang, for you to be in this state, could it be? Hall Master Yuan frowned and stared at Jian Wushuang. The inverse cultivation test for the third heaven. Jian Wushuang raised his head and said, I was right. Hall Master Yuan and Lei Chao looked at each other. They knew that since Jian Wushuang's current state was not caused by other people, the only other possibility was the inverse cultivation test. What's wrong with your inverse cultivation test this time around? Hall Master Yuan questioned. I am not sure either. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Previously, after I came out of Wu Bei's cave, my abilities were already very close to their peak. Under normal circumstances, when my abilities reached such a level, the inverse cultivation test for the third heaven should have descended. Hence, I intentionally stayed within the lineage of star to wait for the arrival of the inverse cultivation test. After waiting for a total of 1,800 years, which caused my abilities in every area to reach its peak, the inverse cultivation test did not show any signs of descending at all. However, this time around, after I received the news from the Vientiane Tower, I set off to the Jiogong Holy Kingdom to capture Lung Zuanju alive. At the start, it was still quite smooth. However, at the most critical moment, where I was in an intense battle with someone, the inverse cultivation test for the third heaven descended without any warning. It descended abruptly. Hall Master Yuan was stunned. There were actually no warnings at all. Lei Chao was also shocked. For the god's test of a normal universe god, there would be some warnings given when it was about to descend, so that the universe god could catch the warning and know when the god's test would descend clearly. This would then allow them to have sufficient time to make preparations. This was what had happened to many cultivators. As for inverse cultivators, although they were different from the rest, during the previous two inverse cultivation tests, they had also given Jian Wushuang ample time to prepare. However, this time, which was the third time, there were no warnings. Hence, there was no time to make any preparations. Back then, I was stunned as well. After all, I was in a close-quarters fight with a void real god. As soon as the inverse cultivation test descended, my divine power started to weaken speedily. Jian Wushuang's old face turned grave. It's not only my divine power. Even my soul power, my comprehension toward the heaven way, as well as all the secret skills that I learnt all began to weaken. Now, not even the slightest bit of my divine power and soul power remain. This is the same for my comprehension toward the heaven way. Hence, it can be said that the current me has been reduced to a normal person. During the journey back here, I tried to gather my divine power and also comprehend the heaven way. However, there was no effect at all. Furthermore, this inverse cultivation test has also caused my body to change. My body has become like a normal person's, and my hair has turned white naturally. With that, I became lifeless, which is my current state now. I also had an impression that I would live every day with no thought of tomorrow. Live every day with no thought of tomorrow. Hall Master Yuan and Lei Chao became stupefied. Jian Wushuang was originally an extremely powerful and an exceptional genius who could compete against a peak void real god. However, in the blink of an eye, he had been reduced to a normal old man who had no power at all and could only live day to day with no thought of tomorrow. This was the inverse cultivation test of the third heaven. Chapter 1560, Senior Wushuang. Chapter 1560, Senior Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, have you already passed inverse cultivation test, or are you still in the process of the test? Hall Master Yuan creased his eyebrows as he asked. Should be still in the process of the test. Jian Wushuang replied, and I can feel that my third inverse cultivation test will be much longer than the two previous inverse cultivation tests. In other words, my current state will remain for quite some time. How much longer? Hall Master Yuan asked. I don't know. Jian Wushuang shook his head. He knew that he was passing through the test, and the test would take very long, but he couldn't determine just how long exactly it would last for. Such a strange test. I have never heard about it before. This is troublesome, Hallmaster Yuan said in a deep voice. Really troublesome. Even with Jian Wushuang's mental state, he could feel a faint helplessness. One should know that ever since he started cultivation, he had only relied on his own power. With his power, he was confident. Even if he were to run into strong enemies, he would figure out a way to grow in an unfavorable environment. But then, his power was non-existent. Regardless, as your inverse cultivation test has descended, everything that is meant to happen is going to happen. Plus, I can only rely on myself to go through this inverse cultivation test. No one else can help me with it. I will endure everything on my own. Very soon, Jian Wushuang had left the cave dwelling and walked towards his sword star. As for Hallmaster Yuan and Lei Chao, they went to search for ancient books to see if they could find any solution. In Lineage of Star, among the rolling palaces, Jian Wushuang, who was hoary-looking with gray hair, was slowly walking forward. His footsteps were very slow. After all, not only did he become a commoner, he became a gray-haired elderly. He didn't possess any power. To him, every step that he took was difficult too. On the way, he naturally ran into many disciples of Lineage of Star. When the disciples of Lineage of Star saw Jian Wushuang, they were shocked. Who is this person? Who would he carry the token of Disciples of Star Palace on him? Disciples of Star Palace? Impossible. I've never seen him. Plus, this person didn't seem to have any fluctuations of divine power. Commoner? Really? At first, the disciples didn't even recognize Jian Wushuang, but were only suspicious about why Jian Wushuang was carrying the token of Disciples of Star Palace. But very soon, this person, he looks like Senior Wushuang. What nonsense are you talking about? Senior Wushuang is such an amazing genius. How could he be related to this old man that doesn't even have any fluctuations of divine power? But his life aura is exactly the same as Senior Wushuang's. I've seen Senior Wushuang before. That's why I'm familiar with Senior Wushuang's life aura. It's really Senior Wushuang's life aura. A person's facial features and body could change, but his life aura would never change. The disciples saw Jian Wushuang, but couldn't recognize him. Whoever had seen him before could recognize his life aura, though. Senior Wushuang, how come he changed like that? This is clearly an old man who is dying. How could it be the Senior Wushuang I adore? I don't believe this. I won't believe this. Impossible. Senior Wushuang is so amazing. It's impossible that he would change like this. Many disciples roared angrily and were not willing to believe what they saw. They followed Jian Wushuang. When they saw Jian Wushuang walk toward Sword Star, and Qiu Yu, who was the leader among the maidservants in Sword Star, escort and help him personally to get into Sword Star, the disciples of Lineage of Star finally believed it. The old man who looked like he was going to die at any time was Jian Wushuang. On that day itself, Hallmaster Yuan announced personally that when Jian Wushuang was wandering outside, someone had plotted against him, and he had gotten poisoned. Hence, he had lost all his power, and he couldn't recover in a short period of time. The moment the announcement was made, the entire lineage of Star shook, and everyone was bubbling over. On Sword Star, Jian Wushuang sat down on a chair slowly. Qiu Yu and the other maidservants stood there politely, and they obviously looked concerned. Especially Qiu Yu. "Mister, what has happened to you?" Qiu Yu asked anxiously. "Don't worry, I'm okay. I'll recover in no time. As for the rumors outside, don't worry about it," Jian Wushuang said. Although Jian Wushuang said so, Qiu Yu was still very worried. Jian Wushuang, didn't say much, but came to the secret room, where he cultivated in seclusion on sword start. He sat down in the secret room, but his face looked solemn. Although he had behaved at ease before Hall Master Yuan, Chiu Yu and the others, in actual fact, he was even more worried than anyone else. I cultivated over the years, went through so much training, fought life and death battles, in exchange for my power. It vanished just like that. And of all times, it happens to be when I got to see Lung Rushue, and when I desired power the most. It just suddenly descended. This inverse cultivation test, what is going on? Jian Wushuang roared in the bottom of his head, and his hoary face grew red. Jian Wushuang, don't get too emotional. You must steady your mind. King of Venomous Worm's voice suddenly rang in Jian Wushuang's head. Don't forget about real god Wu Bei in Wu Bei's cave. Huh. Jian Wushuang looked surprised. Real god Wu Bei. Back when Jian Wushuang had asked real god Wu Bei about the third inverse cultivation test, real god Wu Bei had never said clearly, but he did mention that his drastic change of disposition was due to his experience of his third inverse cultivation test. The other Almighties referred to him as a madman. The third inverse cultivation test that real god Wu Bei had experienced should be the same as the one he was in. Real god Wu Bei could become an inverse cultivator of real god level, and his power could be compared favorably with an Almighty's. He naturally was an impressive figure. However, even he had a drastic change in disposition after he passed through the third inverse cultivation test. While you are in the midst of the test, if you were to act recklessly, you might turn out like real god Wu Bei. Plus, this is a really decent situation. Don't forget, the third inverse cultivation is your biggest test. This test is definitely much more strict than the others. King of Venomous Worms roared. Jian Wushuang felt his chest tighten. He kept quiet for a while, and finally let out a breath of relief. I misbehaved. Jian Wushuang calmed down. Anyone who experiences what you're encountering would misbehave, or even go mad. It's normal, but you have to steady your mind. Don't get flustered. Otherwise, you might be doomed forever. King of Venomous Worms exhorted. I know. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. He understood it well. Oh yeah, King of Venomous Worms, since I became like this, what effect does it have on you as my parasitic beast? Chapter 1561, The Collapse of the Sacred Altar and Falling to Rock Bottom. Chapter 1561, The Collapse of the Sacred Altar and Falling to Rock Bottom. Humph! Thanks to your inverse cultivation test, I have returned to a newborn state, the King of Venomous Worms complained. Newborn state, which is equivalent to a newborn human baby. Jian Wushuang was stunned. That's right. If you were to fight with someone now, don't hope for me to help you recover your divine power. The King of Venomous Worms was obviously not happy. In my current state, how could I fight anyone? Perhaps even a random universe god could kill me easily. Jian Wushuang forced a smile. However, it was obvious that his mood had become slightly better. During the next period of time, Jian Wushuang stayed at the Sword Star quietly and lived the life of a normal person. As for the news of Jian Wushuang being poisoned by a potent poison and losing his abilities completely, it spread quickly within the 10 cultivation sanctuaries like a storm. Countless experts within the 10 cultivation sanctuaries were shocked by the news, especially the experts on the Universe God ranking list. No one had expected Jian Wushuang, who had displayed his impressive talents in Wu Bei's cave not long ago and was thus recognized by experts everywhere as one of the top geniuses by the eternal chaotic world, to actually experience such a change abruptly. This had completely exceeded everyone's expectations. After getting to know such news, some people sighed emotionally, some people gasped in surprise, and some people pitied him. However, there were of course people who were delighted at his misfortune. For example, Zi Dongwang, who was ranked 4th in the Universe God ranking list. When he knew about Jian Wushuang's change, he laughed delightfully. Poisoned by a potent poison, lost all his abilities, and is even inferior to a normal person. Ha, Jian Wushuang, I didn't expect you to end up like this one day. Humph, it's best for you to stay in this state forever. Back then, Zi Dongwang had suffered greatly due to Jian Wushuang. As such, he naturally hated Jian Wushuang. Apart from people like Zi Dongwang, who hated Jian Wushuang, there were also people who had good relations with Jian Wushuang. For example, Duan Lingfeng had sent a message at once to ask him how he was doing. To the people who were concerned about him, Jian Wushuang had an easygoing look, and he said that he was all right. However, everyone knew without a doubt that his condition was not looking good, and Jian Wushuang was hanging on with all his might. Time passed by. In the blink of an eye, 3,000 years passed. Under a big tree at the Sword Star, 4 shadows sat together. Among the 4 people, apart from Jian Wushuang, there was Ling Feibai, Longya, and Xian Yi. The 3 of them had some form of friendship with Jian Wushuang, and for the past few years, they came to the Sword Star occasionally to meet Jian Wushuang. As for whether Jian Wushuang possessed the same abilities in the past, they were not concerned about it. Jian Wushuang, the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace, is about to begin in a few days' time. Ling Feibai looked at Jian Wushuang and said, "The battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace." Jian Wushuang's expression changed, and he laughed nonchalantly soon after. Time really passes very fast. Another 5,000 years have passed in the blink of an eye. He remembered that before Wu Bei's cave opened, Lineage of Star had just held a battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace. Up to the very moment, he felt that 5,000 years' time had passed in just a split second. "I am not participating in the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace this time around," Jian Wushuang said. Not participating, Ling Feibai, Longya, and Xian Yi, who were beside one another, looked at one another. After that, they nodded their heads. All of them knew that the abilities of Jian Wushuang had not recovered at all. Hence, at his current state, he could not participate in the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace. Moreover, rumors of it being impossible for Jian Wushuang to recover had already spread through the lineage of Star a long time ago. After all, a total of 3,000 years had passed. By his logic, if his abilities could recover, they already should have. However, at that very moment, there were still no signs of him recovering. Thus, this caused over 70 to 80% of disciples and experts of the lineage of Star to think that it would be impossible for Jian Wushuang to ever recover. As for the remaining people, they were disciples who worshipped Jian Wushuang's previous fighting achievements blindly, and they still believed firmly that there would come a day when Jian Wushuang would recover. However, after many days, the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace was held. After Jian Wushuang forfeited, those disciples' final belief disappeared gradually. Everyone believed that the legend created by Jian Wushuang, where the sacred altar that he was carried to by countless universe god experts due to his impressive abilities in Wu Bei's cave, had collapsed. Since the sacred altar had collapsed, Jian Wushuang had fallen to rock bottom. There was probably no chance of him struggling in the future. Even the Vientiane Tower had removed Jian Wushuang's name from the newest universe god ranking list. 3,000 years ago, he had been a genius who was talked about enthusiastically by numerous experts in the eternal chaotic world. However, at that very moment, he had become a topic that the experts sighed about occasionally. Even within Lineage of Star, there were also people who had been dissatisfied with Jian Wushuang. After all, in the Lineage of Star, One had to be in the top 5 in the battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace to be recognized as a Star Palace disciple. During the most recent battle to become a disciple of the Star Palace, Jian Wushuang had forfeited straight away. On principle, he should be reduced to a normal disciple. However, in actual fact, the lineage of Star had kept his position as a Star Palace disciple. Therefore, he still had the right to obtain a great amount of resources that would be available to Star Palace disciples. For example, the Sword Star, as well as its maids, were the privileges of a Star Palace disciple, and Jian Wushuang still had them to himself. This had naturally caused quite a number of people to be envious of him. Even so, they were pushed back by Hall Master Yuan forcefully, inside a secret room within the Sword Star. 3,000 years have passed. The inverse cultivation test of the third heaven had gone on for a total of 3,000 years. In spite of that, I feel that this test is still far from completion. Jian Wushuang was sitting down with his legs crossed in his position, and he was getting a feel for his own body. The Jian Wushuang of that very moment was still no different from a normal person. He still had white hair and an old look as if he could die any moment. There are still many years ahead of me, and I cannot stay at the Sword Star all the time. If not, my mind will definitely collapse, and I will go crazy, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. He was very certain of how much he had suffered over the past 3,000 years. If not for his mind being exceptionally strong and having reached the peak of the first level, he would have broken down a long time ago. If it were other people, even if they were real gods, they would definitely go crazy during the 3,000 years. Losing all his abilities abruptly, falling from a sacred altar to rock bottom, and being reduced to a normal person abruptly. This was just like a monarch who had stood at the top becoming a beggar overnight. Moreover, it was a beggar who could not see any hope or light. Was this something that a normal person could bear? Moreover, it was not known how long such a situation would continue for. If Jian Wushuang were to stay in the lineage of Star all the time, he would not be able to take it either. Thus, he contacted Hall Master Yuan at once. Hall Master Yuan, I wish to go out to take a walk. Jian Wushuang spoke of his own intentions straight away. Yes, it's about time for you to go outside and take a walk. Hall Master Yuan agreed as well. Tell me, where do you want to go? I am only a normal person now, and it is impossible for me to travel within the eternal chaotic world. Hall Master Yuan, do you know of any place that normal people live? Jian Wushuang asked. Chapter 1562, Qing Tian, Mystery Land. Chapter 1562, Qing Tian, Mystery Land. Mortal world. Hall Master Yuan thought for a while and said, in eternal chaotic world, power is the most important thing. The moment a human is born, their main focus is to cultivate. No matter in which eternal world, it isn't easy to find an immortal world. However, I do know of a mystery land. Although there are many cultivators, there's also a place for commoners. The name of the mystery land is Qing Tian Mystery Land. It's under the control of Green Feather Pavilion. Green Feather Pavilion is within Star Land. If you'd like to go to the mystery land, let me arrange it for you. Sorry for the trouble. Jian Wushuang expressed his gratitude. Then, Jian Wushuang called for Qiu. Mr. Qiu appeared before Jian Wushuang and greeted. In the past 3,000 years, the attitudes of many disciples in lineage of Star did change drastically. However, Qiu and the other maidservants still respected him as before. I want to head over to Green Feather Pavilion. Give me a lift, Jian Wushuang said. Although Green Feather Pavilion was within Star Land, it was still quite a distance from lineage of Star. To Jian Wushuang, who was only a commoner, it was too far. He naturally needed to count on Qiu. Qiu naturally agreed instantly. Very soon, the two of them departed. Qiu escorted Jian Wushuang, and they arrived before the entrance of Green Feather Pavilion very soon. Please help us to inform them that the disciple of lineage of Star, Jian Wushuang, is here to visit. Qiu looked at the disciple guarding Green Feather Pavilion and said, "Disciple of lineage of Star?" The few disciples who were guarding were shocked. One of them looked at Qiu and asked, "Are you the disciple of lineage of Star? Do you have the disciple token?" "I'm not. The one behind me is," Qiu answered. "Him? You're just kidding, right?" The few disciples looked at Jian Wushuang with a strange look, and one even scoffed at the sight. They could obviously tell that Jian Wushuang was a commoner without any fluctuation of divine power. How could such a person be a disciple of lineage of Star, which was highly respectable? "This is the disciple token. You don't have to ask so many questions. Just go ahead and report," Qiu said in a low voice. After the few guarding disciples determined that the token was genuine, they didn't delay any further, but went to report immediately. Very soon, Master of Green Feather Pavilion and a few real gods came to greet him personally. When they saw Jian Wushuang, Master of Green Feather Pavilion, and the few real gods were shocked at the sight. "I heard that the genius in lineage of Star was schemed upon. Then he lost all his power and became a disabled person. From the looks of it, it is true indeed." Master of Green Feather Pavilion muttered to himself and invited Jian Wushuang in. After all, Hall Master Yuan had already gotten in touch with him regarding that. In Green Feather Pavilion, Jian Wushuang walked behind Master of Green Feather Pavilion. He walked very slowly. This is the Jian Wushuang, who was once in the 3rd place on Universe God ranking list. How did he become like this? It's really him. I heard that he was poisoned. I also heard that he made a mistake as he was cultivating, which led to the loss of his power. In short, he is simply a disabled person. If someone takes action against him, they could easily kill him. From a top genius to a disabled person, things are unpredictable. Oh yeah, why did he come to Green Feather Pavilion? I heard that he's going to Qing Tian Mystery Land. There are commoners living there. This man, who was once a top genius, I'm afraid he might have to stay in Qing Tian Mystery Land forever. There might be a place that can contain him. On the way, Jian Wushuang ran into many disciples in Green Feather Pavilion. The conversation that the disciples were having then, Jian Wushuang couldn't hear them at all, but Qiu could. There was rage churning in her eyes, but she suppressed it. Soon, they arrived before a space tunnel that had already activated. Jian Wushuang, this space tunnel leads to Qing Tian Mystery Land. Master of Green Feather Pavilion smiled. Thank you. Jian Wushuang thanked Master of Green Feather Pavilion and turned around. Qiu, here will do. You can return now. Mister, Qiu was shocked. Although there are many commoners living in Qing Tian Mystery Land, there are also many cultivators gathered there. It is very dangerous. How can you wander around alone? I'd better follow you and protect you. You don't need to. I want to walk around alone. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. But Qiu wanted to say something. Don't worry. Qing Tian Mystery Land is within Green Feather Pavilion's control. We Green Feather Pavilion naturally have to protect Jian Wushuang. Master of Green Feather Pavilion smiled. Qiu's eyebrows were still tightly knitted. Go. Jian Wushuang waved his hand, and his figure slowly moved forward. Then he took a leap into the space tunnel. Then Qiu had no choice but to leave. Elder Mingba, Master of Green Feather Pavilion, spoke. Pavilion Master, an elderly in a black robe, walked forward. Although Jian Wushuang is a disabled person, He's a disciple of Lineage of Star after all. The higher-ups in Lineage of Star seem to have yet to give him up. As he came to Mystery Land under Green Feather Pavilion's control, we Green Feather Pavilion have to ensure his safety. Hence, you have to go to Qing Tian Mystery Land personally and follow him all the time. Don't let him die. Master of Green Feather Pavilion's voice was cold. Of course, you only have to ensure that he doesn't die. The rest, don't bother. I understand. Elder Mingba nodded, then immediately went into the space tunnel. Qing Tian Mystery Land. It was a mystery land of an extremely low level. The territory of the Mystery Land was extremely populated, but the number of cultivators was only 10%. The other 90% was just commoners. Different from Eternal Chaotic World, the moment the person fought, he would be listed as a cultivator. But there was only differences of strength. Rolling hills at the depth of the mountain, in a forest. Pack. There was a young boy who looked only 8 to 9 years old, extremely honest and simple. He was hitting a wooden block before him with his bare shoulders. The wooden block was extremely thick. It must have been left by adult cultivators. Although the young boy gave his all by swinging simple punches and slaps on the wood block, it didn't move an inch. But the young boy was very persistent. He trained there for more than an hour and was drenched in his own sweat before stopped. The young man panted in order to slow down his heartbeat and breathing while his eyes were twinkling with determination that a boy of his age didn't usually have. For my mom and Xiao Qiu, I must become a warrior. I must. The young boy clenched his fists. Just then, Chapter 1563, A Celestial Being Descends. Chapter 1563, A Celestial Being Descends. Buzz. A dazzling light appeared from a tree abruptly. The light was too dazzling, and it was definitely the brightest light that the young man had ever seen. When the light glowed, a white-haired old man appeared in the young man's line of vision. Could this be the celestial being that Mother mentioned? The young man stared. At the next moment, the young man ran in front of the white-haired old man. "Old mister, are you a celestial being?" The young man raised his head and looked at the white-haired old man. His face was filled with excitement. A celestial being? Jian Wushuang looked at the little kid in front of him with interest. After seeing his bright, big eyes, he was delighted. If he were at his peak with his abilities, one could say that he was a god in the Qing Tian Mystery Land. However, at the very moment, he was only a normal person. "I am not a celestial being. I am just a person passing by this area." Jian Wushuang laughed. "You're lying. I have never seen such a bright light before. Moreover, you walked out of the light. Hence, you must be a celestial being," the young man said insistently. "Ha! If you wish to think of it that way, then I am a celestial being." Jian Wushuang giggled and looked down. "Little kid, what's your name?" "I am Chen, who from the Chen family village. The people in the village call me Huzi," the young man said. "Chen family village?" Jian Wushuang's expression changed. "My village is at the foot of this mountain. Old celestial being, do you want me to bring you there?" The young man Chen, who said. "Sure, I will take a look." Jian Wushuang laughed. Under Chen, whose guidance, Jian Wushuang walked toward the village at the foot of the mountain. It was an ordinary, simple village. Jian Wushuang came to a bamboo house in the village. Within the bamboo house, there was a middle-aged married woman as well as a 4 to 5-year-old small little girl with a ponytail. "Mother, I met an old celestial being today, and I have brought him with me," Chen, who ran in front of the middle-aged married woman excitedly. The middle-aged old man caressed Chen, whose head, and looked at Jian Wushuang at once. After that, she said with embarrassment, "I'm sorry, old mister. This little kid is not sensible. You are? I'm just a traveler passing by this area. As for my name, I'm Wu Chen. Jian Wushuang chuckled. Wu Chen, walking in a world and not leaving behind any dust or mark. This was what Jian Wushuang wanted. Mr. Wu Chen, you are traveling at the big mountain alone. Aren't you scared of the mountain bandits? Chen, whose mother asked. Mountain bandits? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Yes, this mountain is very huge, and there are more than 100 villages like our Chen family village. Of course, there is also quite a number of mountain bandits within the big mountain. These mountain bandits will rob anyone throughout the year. If someone were to not give them money, he would suffer under their hands. Also, Huzi's father died in their hands. Chen, whose mother said, Is that so? Jian Wushuang nodded his head slightly. Let's not talk about this. The sun has already set. If I'm not wrong, old mister, you have not taken your meal yet, right? I have just finished preparing our meal, and you can join us if you want. Chen, whose mother laughed, and invited Jian Wushuang at the same time. Eat. Jian Wushuang had a puzzled expression. For cultivators, spiritual energy in the universe served as their food. On ordinary days, they would at most have the luck to eat a few special fruits or a few special good foods that were delicious. As for eating to fill the stomach, Jian Wushuang had not done it ever since he became a cultivator. I gratefully accept. Jian Wushuang laughed and accepted the invitation. Plain tea and simple food. However, Jian Wushuang ate it with great relish. After the meal, it was nighttime and a bright moon was high up in the sky. Jian Wushuang sat at a spot halfway up the big mountain and looked down at the brightly lit, peaceful village, which was below him. Compared to cultivators, ordinary humans are indeed weak, and it would not be an understatement to call them ants. However, cultivators have their own benefits, and ordinary humans have their own benefits. At the very least, among the cultivators, not many of them can live such a peaceful life. With a smile, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes. One night passed. Early in the morning, at the crack of dawn, the peaceful village was already very lively. Many men of the village had appeared at the average-sized drill ground at the center of the village. They then took out their own weapons to train. Moreover, most of them trained with long spears. However, most of their spears were wooden long spears, and only a few people possessed metal spears. Jian Wushuang also went to the drill ground to take a look at the different spear skills that the people were training. Their spear skills were the simplest front stabs, carrying the spears and walking for a long distance, as well as swinging the spears around. Although it was ordinary, they could unleash a considerable amount of power if they were to practice continuously. The pitiful thing was that the people within the Chen family village were all ordinary people. Thus, they were using the strength of a normal person. The strongest person could only lift a weight of 100 Jian at maximum. Moreover, there was not even a martial artist. Ha! Humph! 8-year-old Chen, who was also holding a wooden spear that was taller than him, and he was practicing with the adults. His eyes were very determined. Although he was young, his spear skills were executed amazingly with impressive strength. After a long time, the collective training ended, and next was individual training. Huzi, come over here. Jian Wushuang waved. Huzi carried the long spear and ran over. Old mister, what's wrong? After one night, Chen, who knew that Jian Wushuang was not an old celestial being. However, he still treated Jian Wushuang with respect. You like to use a spear? Jian Wushuang looked at Chen, who then asked. Yes, not only me, but most of the people in the village like to use spears. For example, my father also used to use a spear. Moreover, his spear skills were remarkable. Chen, who said, "How remarkable." Jian Wushuang questioned. Not many people in the village could compete with him. Chen, who revealed a proud expression. However, his expression changed after that. "Old mister, do you know spear skills?" Yes, after muttering to himself for some time, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. "I know quite a few." Jian Wushuang was speaking the truth. Although he had only trained in sword principles, he also had some understanding of the other weapons. The only problem was that he was not proficient in them. However, with his realm, even a small understanding would be at the level of a sect master in the Qing Tian mystery land. "Old mister, you really know of spear skills?" Chen, who was delighted, and his voice attracted the attention of quite a number of people around him. A number of the villagers then walked over to him. "Mr. Chen, who, you know of spear skills? Could you be a martial artist?" The villagers also knew that Jian Wushuang was a traveler who had just happened to pass by, and his name was Wu Chun. After seeing the villagers walking over, Jian Wushuang smiled. "I am not a martial artist. However, I know of some spear skills." "That's great. Old mister, could you help me to see this spear that I made myself?" A tough, stocky man asked delightedly. After that, he immediately executed the 3-move spear skill in front of Jian Wushuang. Chapter 1564, Mounted Gangster. Chapter 1564, Mounted Gangster. After he performed a 3-move spear skill in outstanding manner, the surrounding people were astonished. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and said, "Your spear skill is shabby still. There are many places for improvement. Let me give you a few pointers." Jian Wushuang advised sincerely. Although his power had already vanished, his knowledge and experience regarding weapons were still there. After giving pointers, the powerfully built man suddenly saw the light and had a great harvest. "Old Mr. Wu Chen, please take a look at my spear skill." The people in the village asked Jian Wushuang for pointers. The people in the village resided in the deep mountain, and they had no chance to meet any experts. Sometimes there were 1 or 2 warriors who would pass by, but who would bother with them? Then they finally got to meet Jian Wushuang and had found out that he knew so much about spear skills. Of course, they couldn't wait to ask for pointers and also ask him their questions. Jian Wushuang was happy to teach too. He even intentionally taught the people in the village a spear skill. It was an unqualified spear skill that he had obtained back when he had first started to wander in eternal chaotic world, but to the people in Chen village, it was like getting a treasure. Later on, the people in the village would practice this spear skill early in the morning. If they were to run into a problem that they didn't understand, they would ask Jian Wushuang. Hence, Jian Wushuang was highly respected by the people in the village. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had stayed in the village for more than half a month. At the battlefield in the village, Jian Wushuang stood in a corner while Chen, whose sister, sat by his side. She was only a little girl at the age of 4, with 2 braids, Chen Xiu. On the battlefield, everyone in Chen village was going for a battle. The battle was categorized according to age. Chen, who won first place among the kids at the age of 8. Brother got first place again. "He's so amazing." The little girl saw that Chen who had won the first place, and she was dancing in excitement. "Your brother is not amazing, but he is hard-working enough and he is willing to train assiduously. Brother will definitely become a warrior in the future, and I want to be like him too," the little girl said with her childish voice. Jian Wushuang smiled. Just then, dang dang, the ground suddenly shook vigorously. Clatter of horses' hooves. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. "Oh no, it's a mounted gangster. The mounted gangsters are here." Along with the screen, the entire village was suddenly in chaos. "Hurry up, hurry up." A large number of adult men in the village took out their metal or wooden long spears and rushed to the battlefield. Before everyone gathered at the battlefield, bang, a loud bang, and the door of the village was pushed open forcefully. Then, a troop of almost 100 men barged into the village. "Ha, Chen village, we are here to collect the yearly fees." A bright and loud laugh rang through the entire village. "Yearly fees? Misters, haven't we handed in the yearly fees?" An elderly in the village asked. "Humph, you paid the yearly fees to ruffian gang. You have yet to pay to Baisha gang. Hurry up and pay. You have to pay us twice what you paid to ruffian gang." A man with a scar on his face who was leading the mounted gangsters bellowed. "What?" the elderly exclaimed in surprise. "Twice? How can Chen village afford it?" "You can't afford it? Humph, don't blame us then. Brothers, attack. Kill all the men and catch all the beautiful women," the leader of the mounted gangsters roared. Suddenly, the mounted gangsters were like strong wind. They instantly started a massacre. Everyone in Chen village was raging with anger. "Bastard! Fight with them. Kill them. Let them know to not push the men in Chen village the wrong way." The people in Chen village took their weapons and fought against the mounted gangster. They were born in the depths of the mountain, surrounded by the mounted gangsters. They practiced their spear skills every day to improve their strengths in order to deal with the mounted gangsters. It was time for them to counterattack. However, the people in Chen village used weapons that were coarsely made, and most of them were made of wood. However, those gangsters were on their war horses and using metal weapons. There were sabers, axes, long spears, and so on. Plus, among the mounted gangsters, there were quite a few warriors. Although there weren't as many of them as there were people in Chen village, the fight was dominated by them. Most of the people in Chen village were killed by the mounted gangsters directly. Damn it! On the battlefield, Chen Fu, who was still scrawny and small, saw the scene, and his eyes grew red. He carried the long spear in his hand and wanted to charge forward to fight against the mounted gangster. But he moved, and he was immediately grabbed by Jian Wushuang. "Huzi, don't be silly. Hurry up, bring your sister and your mom into the house to hide. What's happening here isn't something children and women can interfere with," Jian Wushuang said. "But, old mister," Chen, who wanted to say something. "Hurry up," Jian Wushuang suddenly bellowed. Chen, who clenched his teeth. Then he immediately pulled Chen Xiu, who was frightened and as pale as a sheet, and ran into the house. While Jian Wushuang stood on the battlefield and watched the massacre before him, there was suddenly a long sword in his hand. The sword was just an ordinary sword. He had no divine power then. He couldn't activate Blood Mountain Sword. He carried a variety of treasures in his hand, like some tokens that contained attack power. Those tokens could easily exterminate the mounted gangster before him the moment it was activated. However, the tokens required divine power to be activated too. Hence, he couldn't use them. But the only thing that he could use was an ordinary and, at best, very sharp sword. Jian Wushuang took a stride forward and entered the battlefield. Just as he leapt, he wielded his sword and instantly stabbed it through a mounted gangster's throat. Then he flicked and stabbed another mounted gangster's eyes. Then Jian Wushuang landed on the ground. The moment he landed, he staggered and fell. Damn! Jian Wushuang's face grew grave. He was a dying old man, and his strength was far behind an ordinary adult's. He possessed great swordsmanship, but he couldn't give full play to it. Just then, he only moved a little and he felt his strenuous. If he were to be slightly strong, like an ordinary adult man, even without the assistance of sword intention, his origins and doctrines, but with the simplest swordsmanship, he was confident he could kill all of the mounted gangster before him. What could he do? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Jian Wushuang tried his best to walk around the crowd. As he walked through one round, he killed 4 mounted gangsters, one was blinded, and the other one got his arm chopped off. But then he was also panting. Where did this old man come from? Take this. Chapter 1565. Powerless. Chapter 1565. Powerless. Where did this old bastard come from? Eat my hammer attack. A fierce shout could be heard. It was from the leader of the mountain bandits, and he was swinging a giant iron hammer around. He then jumped off from the horse and immediately headed toward Jian Wushuang violently. The leader of the mountain bandits was a true martial artist with remarkable abilities. Jian Wushuang could not dodge in time, and he could only use his sword to defend himself. In the end, bam! A loud clashing sound could be heard, and the longsword in Jian Wushuang's hands was sent flying. At the same time, he felt that the skeleton of his body was about to break into pieces from the impact. In addition, he also spit out a big mouthful of blood, and his body retreated continuously. It was only after retreating a total of 10 steps that he managed to regain his posture. However, what followed after that was a tired feeling, and his body fell backwards involuntarily. In the instant he fell down, he saw that some mountain bandits had charged into the bamboo house that Chen and his family were in. No! Jian Wushuang roared madly in his mind. It was a furious roar as he felt a dissatisfaction that he had never felt before. However, he could not do anything as his body could no longer take it at that moment. Even his consciousness went into a deep sleep slowly. Jian Wushuang's consciousness finally woke up after an unknown period of time. As soon as he woke up, he felt the extreme pain from his body. After that, he saw everything in the surrounding area, and it was too tragic to look. The whole Chen family village had become a pool of blood. Jian Wushuang stood up slowly. Everywhere he looked, there were pools of blood and a great amount of bodies strewn around randomly. These bodies were the clansmen of the Chen family village. The Chen family village was gone. The whole village had been massacred. Why did this happen? Jian Wushuang clenched both his fists tightly, and his old face started to become distorted. What a great village it had been that many people had yearned for. What honest clansmen there had been. The day before, it was still a peaceful village. In the blink of an eye, it had become a sea of blood. Moreover, everything happened in front of Jian Wushuang. However, he was unable to stop it. Powerless. It was the first time that Jian Wushuang felt so powerless. From the start of his training until that very moment, he had also experienced numerous thresholds and hardships. However, he had never felt as powerless as he was at the very moment. Without any abilities, he was just a normal person. He could only look on as the villagers were completely massacred by the mountain bandits. At the very moment, Jian Wushuang's heart was filled with rage, and even his body was trembling madly. However, his expression changed abruptly. Jian Wushuang headed to Chen house, the bamboo house, immediately. After entering the bamboo house and witnessing the scene inside, Jian Wushuang was stunned. Within the bamboo house, Chen Xiu and Chen, whose mother were all lying in a pool of blood. In particular, Chen, whose mother was still hugging both Chen and Xiu tightly. Jian Wushuang squatted down slowly and loosened Chen, whose mother's hands, while suppressing the shaking in his heart. Jian Wushuang's eyes moved. He could feel Chen, whose breath. He was still breathing slightly. There's still hope. Jian Wushuang took out an elixir from his Qian Kuan ring immediately. Although he had lost all his abilities, his treasures were still with him. He did not have any treasures to bring the dead back to life with. However, as long as there was still breath, he could bring Chen Hu back to life. After the elixir had entered Chen Hu's body, he recovered from his condition immediately. In just a short amount of time, he opened his eyes. However, when he opened his eyes and saw the scene in front of him, he became stupefied. Straight away after that, "Mother! Xiao Qiu!" "No, no!" Chen Hu shouted continuously, and tears came out of his eyes immediately. Jian Wushuang frowned as he saw this. After that, he took a deep breath and said seriously, "Huzi, let me ask you, do you wish to take revenge?" "Take revenge?" Chen Hu was stunned, but he clenched both his fists tightly. Of course I wish to take revenge. I wish to kill that group of bandits completely and not leave even a single one of them alive. If you wish to take revenge, wipe away your tears. From today on, you shall follow me," Jian Wushuang said. "Understood," Chen Hu nodded his head without thinking. At the same time, he used both his hands to wipe his tears. "Let's go. We should bury your mother and little sister." Together, Jian Wushuang and Chen, who brought the bodies of Chen, whose mother, and Chen Qiu to the back of the mountain, which was the forest in which Chen, who had seen Jian Wushuang for the first time. "Now, wait for me for a while." After Jian Wushuang had finished talking, he returned back to the Chen family village. As he stood in the pool of blood at the Chen family village, Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked toward the empty sky. "I know that there should be an expert of the Green Feather Pavilion nearby. Although I don't know whether you are a universe god or real god." Jian Wushuang took out a Qian Kuan ring with a wave of his hand. "Inside this Qian Kuan ring, there are 10 million chaos gems. I hope that you can help me to bury the villagers of the Chen family village properly." Jian Wushuang placed the Qian Kuan ring above a stone and left after that. Not long after Jian Wushuang had left, swoosh, a shadow descended abruptly, appeared beside the Qian Kuan ring, and took it. This person was naturally Elder Ming Ba of the Green Feather Pavilion. Elder Ming Ba had remained hidden all the while. His duty was to not allow Jian Wushuang to die in the sky blue mystery land. As for what Jian Wushuang had experienced within the mystery land, he did not care about it. For example, Ming Ba was not concerned about the massacre that the Chen family village had experienced in the slightest. A group of commoners was only a group of ants. Therefore, they were not worthy enough for him to take action. Moreover, he would not participate in the fight between the commoners. Although Jian Wushuang was seriously injured, as long as he was not dead, Elder Ming Ba would not take action. Jian Wushuang had paid the price of 10 million chaos gems to get him to give the village a proper burial. Thus, he appeared at that very moment. Then, in accordance to Jian Wushuang's request, he buried the villagers of the Chen family village. At the back of the mountain, inside the forest. Even though Jian Wushuang and Chen Hu had teamed up, they still spent many hours burying Chen Hu's mother and Chen Qiu properly. "Huzi, from today on, you shall follow me, and I will teach you spear skills." Jian Wushuang looked at Chen Hu. Chen Hu was extremely emotional. In the next moment, he knelt down immediately and kowtowed to Jian Wushuang respectfully. "Greetings to Master." "Master?" Jian Wushuang shook his head. "I did not say that I would take you on as my disciple. However, if you wish to call me Master, by all means do so. Follow me." Jian Wushuang brought 8-year-old Chen, who with him, and headed to the deepest part of the forest. From that day on, Jian Wushuang started to teach Chen, Hu wholeheartedly. Although he had lost his abilities, he had knowledge and experience that no one in the Mystery Land had. Not to mention that Chen, who he was currently teaching, was only an 8-year-old child. Even if it were those martial artists who stood at the top in this world and were equal to the eternal chaotic world's doctrine masters and heaven masters, Jian Wushuang could still teach them effectively. Time passed by, and 10 years passed in a flash. Chapter 1566, Spear Demon, Chen Hu. Chapter 1566, Spear Demon, Chen Hu. In the gorge of a luxuriant forest, Jian Wushuang, who had gray hair and looked as though he was going to die any minute, was sitting in silence. On the top of the mountain before Jian Wushuang, vroom, a sudden flowing light dove down. One should know that the mountain was about 100 zhang high, and the person who dove down obviously didn't know how to travel in the air. But as he fell, bang, 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 his palm or feet would tap the mountain wall by the side and continuously unload the force. In the end, he landed flawlessly on the ground. Master, Chen, who walked before Jian Wushuang. After 10 years, Chen, who had grown up into a brawny, good-looking young man. He carried a purple spear on his back. Huzi, you're 18 this year, right? Jian Wushuang lifted his head to look at Jian Wushuang. Although Chen, who had already grown up and become an adult, Jian Wushuang still called him Huzi, but Chen, who wasn't unhappy about it. Yes, Chen, who said, 18 years old. It's about time. We should leave, Jian Wushuang said. Leave? Chen, who stunned. Why? Didn't you say that you want to take revenge? Unless you don't want it anymore? Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Of course not. Even when I sleep, I dream about taking revenge. Chen, who clenched his fists, and there was a terrifying, murderous intention shimmering in his eyes. Then let's go. Jian Wushuang and Chen, who had stayed in the forest for 10 years, were finally leaving. In the rolling hills, although it was only 10 years to a mortal world, there was already a drastic change. In the past 10 years, the originally different gangs of mounted gangsters only had one left, which was Baisha Gang. Ever since Baisha Gang was founded, they had cleaned out all the other mounted gangsters and unified them in a few years' time. Until then, there was only Baisha Gang. It was said that they had more than 20 warriors, and more than 100 villages around the mountain had to pay them yearly fees. Otherwise, the village would have vanished into thin air like Chen Village 10 years ago. But then, that day, a young man who held a purple long spear, who looked less than 20 years old, barged into Baisha Gang's lair alone. He called himself Chen, who from Chen Village, and he had come to take revenge on behalf of Chen Village, which was destroyed 10 years ago. Then there was a ferocious battle. In an hour, the battle ended in merely an hour. An hour later, the 3 leaders of Baisha Gang died. The 20 warriors were all killed. As for the remaining mounted gangsters, Chen, who killed 90% of them. One should know that Baisha Gang had thousands of men since they formed. It also meant that Chen, who had killed more than thousands of mounted gangsters. His fierce power and terrifying massacre spread across. It instantly stirred a great commotion among the hundreds of villages at the mountain and also the cities outside the mountain. After the battle, Chen, who was also given the name Spear Demon. Of course, Chen, who didn't care about the reputation and fame from being Spear Demon. He only cared about the fact that he had finally taken revenge. Chen, who knew clearly that his work had played a factor, but mostly it was because of his master Wu Chen's guidance. Master, where should we go now? Chen, who followed behind Jian Wushuang, as he asked politely. I don't know. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Wherever we want to walk to, I guess. Why? You're not willing to follow the old man anymore? No, Hu Zi is willing to be by master's side forever. Chen Hu said, Forever? That's not necessary. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Then Jian Wushuang brought Chen Hu out from the mountain and started wandering around the world. Jian Wushuang was still in the process of passing his inverse cultivation test. He had no idea how long it would be until the test would be over, but he was only a commoner then, and he would naturally live like a commoner, trekking through difficult terrains and rivers, walking on foot. It was what Jian Wushuang wanted to do. Chen, who followed him, with Jian Wushuang's guidance, his power was continuously improving at a shocking speed. Actually, Chen, who had potential. Through the years he stayed by Jian Wushuang, he had never noticed, but Jian Wushuang had built up his strong constitution using natural treasure. With the resources that Jian Wushuang had on hand, he could totally be the most powerful universe god in Qing Tian Mystery Land anytime. But he didn't do that. He only wanted to teach Chen Hu some basics, but didn't want to decide on Chen Hu's growth. Even though Chen Hu might not become a universe god, all his life, Jian Wushuang wouldn't bother. As time flew past, Chen Hu's power constantly improved at a shocking speed. Sometimes he would launch an attack, and his fame as Demon Spear naturally grew more prominent. In the blink of an eye, it had been 20 years. At a steep, lofty mountain, Jian Wushuang held a wooden staff as he walked upwards with great difficulty. It seemed like he wanted to trek over the mountain. Master, let me carry you? Chen Hu asked. No need. Jian Wushuang waved and wanted to go forward using his own strength. Just then, swoosh, swoosh, there were two figures that suddenly plunged through from the void from afar. They quickly landed before Jian Wushuang and Chen Hu. Chen Hu squinted his eyes, and the purple long spear appeared in his hand. He looked at the two people before him solemnly. He could tell that the two people before him were extremely strong. Mister, you should be Demon Spear. Chen Hu? One of the men in a white robe smiled and asked, It's me. Who are you? What's the matter? Chen Hu sounded cold, and he gave out a faint glower. Don't misunderstand. We are not here to look for trouble with you. The man in a white robe smiled. To be frank with you, we are from Rising Sun Palace. We are here under orders to invite you to join Rising Sun Palace. With your power and your swordsmanship, you definitely could be one of the 12 deputy palace masters in Rising Sun Palace. Rising Sun Palace? Chen Hu was shocked. Jian Wushuang, who had never spoken, suddenly lifted his head. He came to Qing Tian Mystery Land for 30 years. He couldn't fly during the 30 years, and he had been traveling on foot. He never walks too far of a distance, and he was still in one of the dynasties in Qing Tian Mystery Land. The dynasty was known as Divine Light Dynasty, and there were some sects with impressive cultivators in Divine Light Dynasty. Rising Sun Palace was one of the top sections in Divine Light Dynasty. There were many warriors who were dreaming of entering Rising Sun Palace. Plus, a deputy palace master's in Rising Sun Palace was definitely considered to be a higher up in Rising Sun Palace. Chapter 1567, The Old Floor Sweeper. Chapter 1567, The Old Floor Sweeper. Master, Chen, who could not help but look at Jian Wushuang. Since you wish to go, go ahead. Why do you need to ask me? Jian Wushuang laughed. Chen, who frowned slightly and looked at the white-robed man at once. He then said, I can join the Rising Sun Palace. As for whether I can become a deputy palace master, I am not very concerned. However, I have a condition. Please allow my master go to the Rising Sun Palace with me. Your master, the two experts from the Rising Sun Palace, could not help but look at Jian Wushuang. After looking at Jian Wushuang, the two of them had puzzled expressions. They could tell that Jian Wushuang was not a martial artist, and he was merely a normal person. Moreover, he was the kind of person who was about to die. He was actually the master of the spear demon who had made a name for himself in the Divine Light dynasty. If you do not agree to this condition, the both of you can leave. I have said before that I will stay with my master for my whole life. Chen, who said. The two white-robed men looked at each other, and one of them said soon after, I cannot call the shots for this matter. Why don't the both of you return to the Rising Sun Palace with us? And at that time, the palace master will make a decision personally. If the palace master agrees to this, there would naturally be no problem. Master, Chen, who looked at Jian Wushuang again. No problem. Let's go. Jian Wushuang laughed apathetically. Under the guidance of the white-robed men, the two of them headed to the Rising Sun Palace at once. Upon arriving at the Rising Sun Palace, Chen, who had an audience with the Rising Sun Palace master, and he still stated his own conditions bluntly. As for the Rising Sun Palace master, he muttered to himself many times before agreeing to allow Jian Wushuang to stay in the Rising Sun Palace. Jian Wushuang would go to the Rising Sun Palace's martial arts tower to help sweep the floor and tidy up the dust on the valuable martial arts books. Jian Wushuang had no objection to this. Thus, from that day on, Jian Wushuang allowed nature to take its course and stayed within the Rising Sun Palace. He would stay in the martial arts tower every day to sweep the floor, and it was neither good nor bad. Within the Rising Sun Palace, no one would pay attention to him. Only Chen, who would come by occasionally to visit him. In the blink of an eye, another 3 years passed. On this day, 2 Rising Sun Palace disciples walked toward the martial arts tower. Among the 2 disciples were 1 boy and 1 girl. The boy had black, long hair, and he looked handsome. As for the girl, she was a young lady wearing a purple robe. The 2 of them paused at the foot of the martial arts tower, and the black-haired handsome man asked, Junior sister, is the person who can help you solve the difficult martial arts problem really at the martial arts tower? I am not sure myself. However, Palace Master Chen, who is the one who told me that, he said that the bottleneck that I have come across is a great threshold. Without advice from a supreme person, I might be unable to make it past the threshold forever. Palace Master Chen, who is number 1 in spear skills in the Rising Sun Palace. If this is what he said, it is definitely not fake. However, what I did not expect is that even though Palace Master Chen, who and a few experts who were proficient in spear skills in the Rising Sun Palace had come down personally, none of them were able to give me the correct advice. This even caused the Palace Master to come down personally. However, he could not do anything either. The purple-robed young lady gritted her teeth. Martial arts bottleneck was indeed a great threshold. Moreover, the threshold that she encountered at the very moment would affect her achievements and destiny. Hence, she must think of all sorts of ways to overcome it. Thus, you came to this martial arts tower. The black-haired, handsome man glanced at the purple-robed young lady. I have already thought of all sorts of ideas, including going to my master, Palace Master Chen, who, however, even though all of them had tried all ways, they were still unable to do anything. But yesterday, Palace Master Chen, who told me that in the whole Rising Sun Palace, or even in the whole Divine Light dynasty, there might only be one person who could help me, and he is in the martial arts tower. The purple-robed young lady stared at the martial arts tower with excitement. Let's go there. The 2 of them stepped foot on the martial arts tower. However, after searching the whole martial arts tower, they only found a normal old man who was sweeping the floor in the end. Junior sister, Could Palace Master Chen, who be wrong? Where is the supreme person from the martial arts tower? The black-haired, handsome man said gloomily, "No, not possible. Palace Master Chen, who would definitely not lie to me." The purple-robed young lady shook her head repeatedly. "However, in the whole martial arts tower, there is only one person, which is that old man sweeping the floor. Could he be that supreme person?" The black-haired, handsome man frowned. The purple-robed young lady's expression turned icy cold. However, in the next moment, she went in front of the old floor sweeper. They then stared at the white-haired old man who was sweeping the floor with great concentration carefully. However, no matter how they looked, they still felt that the old man was absolutely a normal person. Moreover, he might even be inferior to a normal person. After taking a deep breath, the purple-robed young lady opened her mouth and spoke, "Greetings to Elder. I am Ze." The white-haired old man raised his head slowly and revealed an old face. "Do you have something for me? I have encountered a bottleneck in my martial arts, and I hope that Elder can resolve it for me." Ze explained her objective directly. Of course, she did not mention that it was Palace Master Chen, who had told her to come. After all, Palace Master Chen, who had told her to absolutely not mention his name. "Oh," the white-haired old man shot a glance towards Ze, and he exposed her straight away. "It's that little kid Chen, who asked you to come, right?" The eyes of Ze and the black-haired handsome man brightened up. They immediately understood that the white-haired old man in front of them was the supreme person who Palace Master Chen who mentioned. "I hope that Elder can help me." Ze greeted the white-haired old man respectfully. "Ha! I am just a poor old man who is about to die. Yet that little kid is still giving me trouble." Jian Wushuang laughed indifferently and looked towards Ze after that. "Great timing. I am quite tired now. Since you two little kids have come, both of you can help me to clean the martial arts tower." "What?" Ze and the black-haired handsome man were stunned. The supreme person in front of them did not even mention helping Ze to resolve the bottleneck problem of her martial arts. Instead, he had asked the both of them to help him clean the martial arts tower. "Why? Are you unwilling to help an old man like me?" Jian Wushuang laughed. "No, Elder. Please take a rest by the side. I will take care of the rest." Ze took over the broom straight away. "Junior sister," the black-haired handsome man looked over. "Are you really going to help him sweep the floor? This is manual labor to be done by servants." "Manual labor? Humph, don't even mention sweeping the floor. If it can help me to overcome the martial arts bottleneck, no matter how difficult the task is, I will not turn it down." Ze said. "What if, after helping him to sweep the floor, he is still unable to solve your problem?" the black-haired handsome man said. "Then treat it as me showing respect to an elderly." Ze continued to speak. "Senior brother, if you are not willing to help, please stand by the side and not bother me." After finishing her speech, Ze started to clean the martial arts tower thoroughly. The black-haired handsome man frowned and did not say much. He then stood by the side. As for Jian Wushuang, he was lying down on the ground by the side. While lying down, he took out a bottle of wine and started drinking. In the blink of an eye, more than an hour had passed, and Ze had cleaned up the whole martial arts tower thoroughly. After that, she went to Jian Wushuang. "Elder, I have finished helping you clean the martial arts tower," Ze said, sounding tired. Chapter 1568, Pointers. Chapter 1568, Pointers. The gray-haired elderly, Jian Wushuang, who was drinking casually, looked at the surrounding and nodded in silence. Ze was really sweeping the floor attentively, but didn't intend to take a perfunctory attitude. "Not bad. Put down the broom." Jian Wushuang said. Yes, Ziyi immediately put the broom to the side. You said that you reached a bottleneck in martial arts. Jian Wushuang glanced at Ziyi. Perform your skill and see. Yes, Ziyi immediately took out a long spear and performed before Jian Wushuang at the martial arts tower. Although the spear skills that she performed didn't use too much force, it was powerful. She had yet to perform 1/5 of her spear skill. You can stop now, Jian Wushuang spoke. Senior, Ziyi stopped and looked at Jian Wushuang curiously. Your spear skills are ferocious. It's like a mountain when it doesn't move, and it's like thunder when it does. It's considered a good spear skill, but you're taking a wrong approach in this. You only focused on the movement, but you forgot the most important thing in spear skill, momentum. Jian Wushuang said calmly. Ziyi instantly stared with her eyes wide open. Her spear skill was exactly like Jian Wushuang had described. It lacked the core of spear skills, which was the existence of momentum. One should know that she had inquired with many experts who were good with spears in Rising Sun Palace. The experts included Palace Master Chen, who they spent a long time observing her spear skill and asked her many questions in order to determine the imperfections of her spear skill. But the ordinary elderly that looked extremely frail could already tell her flaws after he took a brief look, and she had only performed 1/5 of her skill. Just how experienced was he? Ziyi instantly understood that the person before him was a true superior. He might really be able to help her pass through the bottleneck in her martial arts journey. Senior, please teach me. Ziyi immediately bowed at Jian Wushuang politely. You are too stubborn when it comes to spear skill. You relied on continuous practice without putting any attention on your momentum, but still reached the profound realm. You already shaped the spear skill, and it would be impossible if you were to intend to master momentum from this spear skill. However, if you were to break one move in your spear skill down into 2 or 3 moves, make it from easy to difficult, slowly dissect, and understand them step by step, you might be able to improvise your current situation. Then, your spear skill would be perfect, Jian Wushuang said. Dissect the spear move? 1 move into 2 or even 3 moves. How is it possible? It was as though Ziyi had heard something unbelievable. The good-looking man with black hair who stood by the side was gawking too. What's impossible? Jian Wushuang smiled. Pass me your long spear. Ziyi didn't hesitate, but immediately passed her long spear to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang took over the long spear and started practicing in martial art tower. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The spear shadows whistled, but didn't have too much force. It looked rather ordinary too. However, Ziyi and the black-haired man were gawking at the sight. They saw that Jian Wushuang had performed 9 moves at one goal. It was an entirely different set of moves, but they could clearly feel that the 9 moves were derived from the 3 moves from the earlier spear skill that Ziyi performed. The white-haired elderly really did dissect Ziyi's spear skill. He broke 1 move into 3 moves, and every move was smooth, just like a 1-spear skill. How is it possible? There were billowing waves overwhelming Ziyi. After showing 9 moves, Jian Wushuang stopped. Sai, I'm old now. I just moved a little, and I can't take it. Jian Wushuang patted his back, and there was sweat on his face. He obviously wasn't pretending. He really did feel weary. That's it for today. You shall return. Jian Wushuang passed the long spear back to Ziyi. Ziyi held back her excitement as she bowed at Jian Wushuang politely. Senior, I will come again tomorrow. Sure, but before you see me, remember to sweep the floor in martial arts tower. Although you swept the leaves downstairs today, it'll be covered with leaves again tomorrow. Jian Wushuang said. Don't worry, Senior. I will definitely clean everything up for you. Ziyi was delighted. Very soon, Ziyi and the black-haired man left. On the second day, the two of them came again. Just like Jian Wushuang had commanded, they cleaned up the leaves in martial arts tower too. Jian Wushuang then helped Ziyi to dissect another 3 moves of her spear skill. Then, 10 days flew past. Jian Wushuang dissected Ziyi's spear skill entirely, and Ziyi memorized it carefully. Then, she followed Jian Wushuang's instructions to carefully study and comprehend them. Half a month later, she broke through the bottleneck. She mastered the momentum and performed the spear skill flawlessly. The news spread, and the entire Rising Sun Palace was surprised. One should know that the bottleneck that Ziyi faced, many palace masters and elderlies in the palace had helped personally, but they couldn't resolve it. But then, regarding her solution, the higher-ups in Rising Sun Palace asked Ziyi personally. When they found out that the person who helped Ziyi resolve the problem was the ordinary elderly that had swept the floor in Martial Arts Tower, the higher-ups were astonished, especially when they found out Jian Wushuang's solution was to dissect an amazing spear skill by breaking 1 move into 3 moves. They had never heard of such a solution, nor did they dare to think of it themselves. Even the master of Rising Sun Palace found it unbelievable. The only one who could understand would only be Chen, who alone. The higher-ups in Rising Sun Palace instantly realized that the elderly in Martial Arts Tower might not be an ordinary person. Hence, the master of Rising Sun Palace came to Martial Arts Tower personally to visit Jian Wushuang. During his visit, there were many higher-ups of Rising Sun Palace waiting outside Martial Arts Tower. They watched the master of Rising Sun Palace enter Martial Arts Tower and take out a broom. Then, he started sweeping the fallen leaves on the open ground below Martial Arts Tower. It took almost an hour, and he finally swept all of the fallen leaves. Then, the master of Rising Sun Palace returned to Martial Arts Tower. 2 hours later, the master of Rising Sun Palace finally walked out of Martial Arts Tower again. But then, he couldn't contain the joy in him. Superior, he is truly superior. Merely a simple pointer, and I suddenly see the light. My doubts have been instantly resolved. In Rising Sun Palace, there is such an unbelievable superior. No wonder he could bring up an outstanding disciple like Chen Hu. Chapter 1569. Follow one's mind and nature, mind of the universe. Chapter 1569. Follow one's mind and nature, mind of the universe. The Rising Sun Palace master was extremely emotional. Back then, everyone in the Rising Sun Palace had thought that Chen, whose master was only a normal person. For him to bring Chen, who to his current level, it was all because Chen, who was an outstanding person. However, at that very moment, no one dared to think that way. At the present day, the Rising Sun Master had instructed the experts in the Rising Sun Palace to not spread news of the Supreme Person outside. Time continued to pass by. Jian Wushuang continued to stay at the Martial Arts Tower in the Rising Sun Palace, and just like before, he was unknown to the public. Apart from some of the higher-ups in the Rising Sun Palace, those normal disciples still did not know about him. As for the Divine Light dynasty, there was nothing about him either. It wasn't until 40 years later that the monarch of the Divine Light dynasty came down personally to visit him. The monarch had come across a bottleneck in his martial arts, and he was unable to overcome it for a long time. After that, he had managed to get news from unknown sources, and he knew of the existence of the Supreme Person in the Rising Sun Palace. Hence, he held some hope and came to pay a visit. Since the monarch came down personally, the Rising Sun Palace dared not give him the cold shoulder, and they brought him to the Martial Arts Tower to see Jian Wushuang. However, when the monarch raised his problem, Jian Wushuang threw a broom to him and got him to sweep the martial arts tower and the dead leaves at the foot of the tower before coming back to ask him questions. Moreover, the monarch had to do it himself. At once, this caused many experts behind the monarch to be extremely surprised and furious. Although the monarch of the Divine Light dynasty himself was a bit dissatisfied, he still acted in accordance to Jian Wushuang's instructions, as it was his final hope. The great monarch of a dynasty was actually cleaning up the fallen leaves in front of everyone. If such news were to get out, it would definitely become a joke. However, the monarch did not get angry in the slightest. In addition, after the work was done, he was extremely delighted. This was because Jian Wushuang had solved his problem accurately, and his abilities even went up to the next level. The monarch of the Divine Light dynasty also understood that the white-haired old man in front of him was indeed a supreme person, and he immediately said that he wanted Jian Wushuang to be his master. With that, Jian Wushuang would have a position that was only inferior to his own. However, he was rejected by Jian Wushuang in the end. The monarch had no choice but to leave. The news then started to spread, and the whole Divine Light dynasty, as well as even a few dynasties nearby, were in an uproar. With that, a large number of cultivators would come to the Rising Sun Palace to pay a visit every day as they wanted to meet Jian Wushuang. Thus, Jian Wushuang's peaceful life had completely gone. He knew that he could no longer stay in the Rising Sun Palace, and he left that very day. When he left, he only requested for someone to pass Chen, who had secluded himself in training, a message. It was fortunate that Chen, who had secluded himself in training. If not, he would definitely follow Jian Wushuang immediately. As for the experts in the Rising Sun Palace, although most of them were unwilling to let Jian Wushuang leave, they had no choice. From today on, I must rely on myself to travel around all the lands in this world. Jian Wushuang had a smile on his face. He was wearing a simple black robe and holding a wooden stick in his hand. Moreover, he was also barefooted. With that, he started to travel alone in the Qing Tian mystery land. On the streets, Jian Wushuang was walking forward step by step. Jia, Jia. Sounds of hooves clopping on the ground could be heard from behind. Although Jian Wushuang wanted to give way, a gust of wind passed by him from his side and caused him to fall to the ground. His arms and thighs started to bleed as a result of him falling down, and his shirt was torn open as well. It was only after a long time that he stood up, trembling. If he were to come across such a situation back then, he might be extremely furious. However, at that very moment, his mind was extremely calm, and he did not feel anything. After that, he continued to walk forward. With the body of an ordinary old man, Jian Wushuang traveled around the world barefoot. During his journey, not only was he bumped into by people many times, he also fell down from the mountains and rolled down from both mountains and rivers. Moreover, he was also robbed by bandits and caught by slave traders before. He had been a beggar, servant, prisoner, and slave. Furthermore, he had used his current abilities to face everything that came his way. However, no matter what he encountered, his life was not in danger. It was not just because of the Green Feather Pavilion expert protecting him secretly. Although Jian Wushuang had white hair, in actual fact, his life force was so strong that it was shocking. Throughout the years, he had experienced many hardships. However, no matter what happened, he did not die. During this process, the years passed continuously. Jian Wushuang had stopped being concerned about the time a long time ago. He was even unconcerned about the inverse cultivation test for the third heaven that he was currently experiencing. Not only that, he had also completely forgotten about his brilliance and impressiveness in the past. At that very moment, he was just a normal person. He had completely integrated with his identity as a normal person. Hence, he would deal with anything that came his way with a normal person's eyes and abilities. As for Elder Ming Ba, who kept himself hidden all the while at the very start, he had sneered at whatever happened to Jian Wushuang in the Qing Tian mystery land with contempt and revealed a compassionate expression, as he then felt that Jian Wushuang was very pitiable. However, as time passed by, he became numb as well. Seems like this Jian Wushuang, who was once an exceptional genius, has completely integrated into life as a normal person. I wonder how long he will remain in this state. Could it be that he will remain like this forever? Mingba frowned. He did not care whether Jian Wushuang was going to continue on in his current state. The key thing was that he had to protect Jian Wushuang, and he could not allow him to die for real. If Jian Wushuang were to remain in his current state and stay in the Qing Tian mystery land for tens of thousands of years or even hundreds of years, didn't that mean that he had to stay that long as well? Although Ming Ba was very unwilling, he had no choice. In a flash, Jian Wushuang had come to the sky-blue mystery land for a total of 5,000 years. Deep inside a big mountain, Jian Wushuang's hair was messy, his clothes were tattered, and his body was thin and weak like a skeleton's. At that very moment, he was looking down. There was a village. It was a village that had been massacred until blood flowed like a river, just like the Chen family village. After seeing such a scene, Jian Wushuang shook his head lightly. There is a cycle of cause and effect. Everything has its own destiny, and even cultivators with strong abilities are unable to change it. This is the same for a normal person. Relative to the Qing Tian mystery land, I am merely a passing traveler. Just like my name, Wu Chen, which I used, I will not leave behind any dust or any mark. I will not stir up any trouble or stain myself with dust. Everything will go according to my mind, my nature, and, finally, my destiny. As Jian Wushuang murmured, his mind was filled with thoughts and feelings. His mind had changed and risen to a new level. By following my mind and nature, I will achieve the mind of the universe. So it's like this. Jian Wushuang laughed. He had lost all his abilities, and every aspect of him had lost its worth. The only thing that remained was his mind. Ever since he had achieved the first level of the mind, after so many years, he had also finally achieved the second level of the mind of the universe. And at that very moment, Jian Wushuang's expression changed abruptly. He could feel that small, sudden extra movement within his body. The inverse cultivation test has reached its final stage. Jian Wushuang was still wearing a smile, and he seemed to be unconcerned. He then went to the peak of a mountain, sat down with his legs crossed, and closed his eyes immediately. Chapter 1570, Turn into a stone block for 21,000 years. Chapter 1570, Turn into a stone block for 21,000 years. It was windy at the peak of the mountain, and it was quite chilly. The breeze blew against Jian Wushuang's frail and hoary body, and it was piercingly cold. Jian Wushuang didn't move, but sat there like an old monk in deep meditation. The time flew past. Days, months, and years. Constant exposure to the wind and sun caused a gradual change to Jian Wushuang's body. In the end, he turned into a stone block. Sometimes there were birds that came to rest on the stone block. Sometimes there were humans that reached the peak of the mountain, but no one worried about the stone block. From what they saw, the stone block looked weird in shape, but not much different from any other stone blocks. During the years when Jian Wushuang became a stone block Elder Mingba, the real god from Green Feather Pavilion, watched him in silence in the void. What is this Jian Wushuang trying to do? Mingba was confused. Ever since Jian Wushuang had come to Qing Tian Mystery Land, he had been following Jian Wushuang. He watched Jian Wushuang's experience with his own eyes in the Mystery Land. At the beginning, he had thought that Jian Wushuang already blended into life as a commoner, and he reckoned that he would stay in there for the rest of his life as a commoner. However, he became a stone block, and his aura had yet to disperse. Mingba couldn't understand at all. But he didn't know that Jian Wushuang was at the final stage of the third inverse cultivation test, also the most crucial step: change, reborn. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang finally understood that what he had experienced during the third inverse cultivation test was the life test of fate, from the peak to the pit, from a top genius in everyone's eyes to a disabled person that had no soul power at all, to a person that everyone respected, and in awe to a poor man that no one pitied. He was bullied and tortured. Everything was in the test of fate. The test was testing his mind. The transformation at heart allowed one to detach from worldly views, become open-minded, and accept everything. Then one could see through the fog before his eyes and return to the peak. Otherwise, they would be doomed forever. Just like real God Wu Bei, when he was going through the test, he once went mad. If it wasn't because he had received a warm welcome at his last stage and barely maintained an open heart, he wouldn't be able to go through his third inverse cultivation test. Even if he passed through it, he would be drastically different in disposition. But Jian Wushuang was different. From the change of mind during the 3,000 years in Lineage of Star to when he had first got to Qing Tian Mystery Land and saw Chen village being massacred and turned into an ocean of blood, he nearly went mad too. He might as well have stayed in Rising Sun Palace for a dozen years. He had lived his life of sweeping floor calmly for a dozen years, and his heart was finally at peace. It was truly peaceful, like an old well with no ripples. Then he turned into Wu Chen and blended into a commoner's life. He was open-hearted with everything. Do what one finds satisfactory. Do what one pleases. Everything went according to fate. After thousands of years, even though he looked pathetic in many's eyes, Jian Wushuang was calm and unaffected. Maintaining his attitude, he turned into a stone block and reached the last step. He used a total of 13,000 years in the last step. He turned into a stone block on the peak of the mountain and towered there for 13,000 years. Finally, he woke up. Jian Wushuang. King of Venomous Worm's voice suddenly was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. 3,000 years in Lineage of Star, 5,000 years of walking in Qing Tian Mystery Land, and 13,000 years as a stone block. In total, it was 21,000 years. This 21,000 years, every year, every day, every hour, even every breath is a test, but you didn't disappoint me. Congratulations! From today onwards, you already possess the qualifications to stand at the top of eternal chaotic world, King of Venomous Worms said, and his voice was obviously boiling with excitement. Inverse cultivation, competing with the universe, under the pressure of heaven and earth, resulting in peak. The third inverse cultivation test. One step was more difficult than the other. Every step was a step through the gate of hell. Over the years, 100% of inverse cultivators that had appeared before had died before the third inverse cultivation test. Previously, when King of Venomous Worms recognizes Jian Wushuang as an owner, he was also worried that Jian Wushuang would die during an inverse cultivation test. But then luck had turned in his favor, or maybe it should be described as a trapped dragon soaring into the sky. Jian Wushuang passed through all 3 inverse cultivation tests. From that day onward, his journey of inverse cultivation would have no more tests. He already possessed the qualification to enter the peak expert's rank. Hearing what King of Venomous Worms had said, Jian Wushuang was delighted, but there wasn't a surge of emotion. Slowly, he opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, the stone block that he had become slowly collapsed. A large amount of stones started shattering and revealed Jian Wushuang's scrawny and hoary body. However, the hoary body was undergoing a drastic change. Transformation. After passing the inverse cultivation test, the transformation from a universe god in the 2nd heaven to universe god in the 3rd heaven. The transformation then was different from the previous 2 times. There wasn't any divine light that descended, nor any force or movement. Everything seemed rather calm. In the void, Elder Mingba in Green Feather Pavilion continued to float there. He had been there for 13,000 years, and he was already impatient long ago. I don't know how long I need to wait for. This Jian Wushuang might as well die, but of all conditions he was at the brink of death, and I have to keep him company. Mingba was shaking his head as he sighs. But his face suddenly stiffened as he noticed the transformation of the stone block at the mountain below. This Jian Wushuang. Mingba saw Jian Wushuang's stone block broke down and revealed his hoary body. Then his hoary body, like a piece of dead wood, suddenly recovered its vigor and became strong. Jian Wushuang's skin, which was dry and faintly tainted with yellow, gradually grew rosy. His face slowly became young again. In an instant, Jian Wushuang, who was originally gray-haired like a man of old age, returned to his appearance of a young man who was once high and mighty, that everyone respected. Divine power, a fluctuation of divine power. Mingba stared, and he could feel that not only had Jian Wushuang resumed his original appearance, but his body was also giving out a fluctuation of divine power. The fluctuation of divine power was faint, but it pressured him. This Jian Wushuang, could it be he has recovered? Mingba was shocked at the thought. Just then, on the peak of the mountain, Jian Wushuang, who had returned to his original appearance, his divine body had already completed the transformation. That very moment, he suddenly lifted his head and reined all the lights back in. His eyes, which were deep like vast stars, were looking at Mingba directly. That instant, Mingba quivered in fear, and his face instantly turned pale. Chapter 1571. A stranded dragon rises to the sky. Chapter 1571. A stranded dragon rises to the sky. How is this possible? Mingba was completely stunned. After all, he was a void real god. However, at that very moment, just to gaze at him alone had actually caused him to be terrified and his expression to turn ghastly pale. What kind of ability was this? Even if Jian Wushuang had really regained the abilities of his peak, he should still not be so frightening, right? Could it be that not only did his abilities recover, he also achieved a great breakthrough and became a real god? But his aura is still that of a universe god. Mingba was filled with amazement. Jian Wushuang possessed a treasure manufactured by the Star Palace Master. However, that treasure could only allow Jian Wushuang to pretend to have the aura of a universe god, and not a real god. In other words, since he had already made a breakthrough to the universe god of the 3rd heaven, the aura that was released from his body was also that of a universe god of the 3rd heaven. At the same time that Mingba was shocked, an indifferent voice could be heard. Although I have not interacted with you much for the past 18,000 years in the Qing Tian mystery land, I want to thank you for looking after me secretly. There are 100 million chaos gems here, and they are for you. From now on, you do not need to follow me anymore. Jian Wushuang's voice felt as if it possessed some magical power. When it echoed in Mingba's ears, his eyes became misty. He looked as if he were drunk, and he was sleepy. It was only after the voice disappeared for a long time that he woke up with a start abruptly. When he looked down again, he realized that Jian Wushuang had disappeared from the peak of the mountain ages ago, and what was left was only a Qian Kuan ring. What a horrifying consciousness attack. It merely made my consciousness sleepy and did not make me completely unconscious. Moreover, it did not harm me at all. Such abilities. Looks like Jian Wushuang's abilities have really achieved a great breakthrough. However, he was already ranked third in the Universe God ranking list previously. At the very moment, how powerful is he? Mingba exclaimed and shook his head. After he had picked up Jian Wushuang's Qian Kuan ring, he made his way back to the Green Feather Pavilion. He knew that Jian Wushuang did not need him to observe him secretly anymore. Even if he wanted to observe Jian Wushuang, he did not have the ability to do so. Atop the vast sky, Jian Wushuang wore the blood feather reincarnation armor that was made as a blood robe again. He then carried the blood mountain sword on his back and moved slowly. During his journey, he could not help but stretch himself. This feels so good. Jian Wushuang laughed. It was obvious that he was over the moon. Jian Wushuang, you finally feel comfortable now. During the previous 21,000 years, you were even inferior to a normal person, and you almost died an upsetting death. The king of venomous worms gasped in admiration. A cultivator has his own joys, and a normal person also has his own benefits as well. Jian Wushuang laughed. For the past 21,000 years, minus the 13,000 years that he had become a hard rock, he had lived his life as a normal person for 8,000 years, and these 8,000 years had given him many feelings. No matter what, you have already cleared the inverse cultivation test for the final heaven. Hence, you have gotten past your greatest obstacle, and your journey from now on will be a lot more relaxing. As such, I can set my mind at ease. The king of venomous worms laughed. Also, you must make the best use of your time to think of a way to make a breakthrough earlier to become a real god. As soon as you make a breakthrough to a real god, your ancient god power will achieve the 6th star, and I will evolve along with you. 5-star ancient god and the 6-star ancient god are both great thresholds. As soon as you get past them, your abilities would undergo an earth-shaking change. This change also applies to me. When you become a 6-star ancient god, I will undergo a great change. At that time, I will be able to unleash a fair bit of my fighting capabilities, and I will not need to stay in your body like now and die a depressing death. Don't worry. Since I have achieved the universe god of the 3rd heaven, real God won't be too far away as well. Jian Wushuang laughed. In no time, Jian Wushuang returned to the Divine Light Dynasty again. The Divine Light Dynasty was the place that he had first set foot in when he arrived in the Qing Tian Mystery Land. Within the Divine Light Dynasty, there was another person. He was Chen who, having stayed in the Qing Tian Mystery Land for so many years, he had interacted with quite a number of people. However, among these people, the only person who Jian Wushuang was concerned about was Chen Hu. Divine Light Dynasty, Rising Sun Palace. Even though 18,000 long years had passed, the Rising Sun Palace still existed, and it was even more powerful than it was in the past. In addition, the current palace master of the Rising Sun Palace was Chen Hu. Over the past 18,000 years, his abilities had risen greatly. At that very moment, not only was he recognized as the strongest person by the Divine Light Dynasty, he also possessed the right to stand at the top in the whole Qing Tian Mystery Land. Compared to the past, this little kid has become more mature and sedated. He really has the look of a sect master. Jian Wushuang was floating high up in the skies of the Rising Sun Palace sect. As he looked at everything below him, he had already released his soul power and observed everything within the Rising Sun Palace a long time ago. Naturally, he also saw Chen, who was reprimanding two elders in the lofty palace. Huzi, Jian Wushuang opened his mouth. The voice passed by the void and many halls into the highest part of the towering palace into Chen, whose ears. Chen, who was scolding the two elders, could not help but be stunned. Huzi, it had been very long since someone had called him by that name. It had been about 18,000 years, ever since his master, who he was greatly indebted to, had left the Rising Sun Palace. No one had called him by that name again. At that very moment, a familiar voice and a familiar way of addressing him. "Master, master, is it really you?" Huzi stood up straight away, and his voice was extremely emotional. This caused the elders in the big palace to become stupefied. They were all pleading for their lives, and they did not know what had happened to the palace master. As for the master, who he had mentioned, some elders who had served in the Rising Sun Palace for a very long time thought of a person. The person was a supreme person who had appeared unexpectedly within the Divine Light dynasty. However, the supreme person had left ages ago. At that very moment, could he have returned? Master, Chen, who was still extremely emotional, and he did not care about how the elders would change their perceptions of him. Huzi, listen up. Jian Wushuang's voice echoed in Chen, whose ears. You were the first person I saw when I first appeared in this world. At the same time, you are also the only person in this world who has interacted a lot with me. Although you and I are not master and disciple, you are still considered to be my partial disciple. Today, I am about to leave. However, before I leave, let me tell you something. If you have the time, return back to your previous home to your mother and little sister's burial ground. I have left some opportunities, as well as a test there for you. If you have the ability to clear the test in the future, I will accept you as my disciple for real. Moreover, I will also bring you to the vast world that I am in. However, if you are unable to clear it, this means that we are not destined to be together. With that, please take care of yourself. After his speech, Jian Wushuang's voice disappeared completely. As for Chen, he became stupefied at his position, and at the next moment, his eyes started to glow brilliantly. He could not help but clench his fists as well. Master, don't worry. I will definitely pass the test and obtain your approval. Chapter 1570, Turn into a stone block for 21,000 years. Chapter 1570, Turn into a stone block for 21,000 years. It was windy at the peak of the mountain, and it was quite chilly. The breeze blew against Jian Wushuang's frail and hoary body, and it was piercingly cold. Jian Wushuang didn't move, but sat there like an old monk in deep meditation. The time flew past. Days, months, and years. Constant exposure to the wind and sun caused a gradual change to Jian Wushuang's body. In the end, he turned into a stone block. Sometimes there were birds that came to rest on the stone block. Sometimes there were humans that reached the peak of the mountain, but no one worried about the stone block. From what they saw, the stone block looked weird in shape, but not much different from any other stone blocks. During the years when Jian Wushuang became a stone block, Elder Mingba, the real god from Green Feather Pavilion, watched him in silence in the void. What is this Jian Wushuang trying to do? Mingba was confused. Ever since Jian Wushuang had come to Qing Tian Mystery Land, he had been following Jian Wushuang. He watched Jian Wushuang's experience with his own eyes in the Mystery Land. At the beginning, He had thought that Jian Wushuang already blended into life as a commoner, and he reckoned that he would stay in there for the rest of his life as a commoner. However, he became a stone block, and his aura had yet to disperse. Ming Ba couldn't understand at all. But he didn't know that Jian Wushuang was at the final stage of the third inverse cultivation test, also the most crucial step: change, reborn. At that very moment, Jian Wushuang finally understood that what he had experienced during the third inverse cultivation test was the life test of fate, from the peak to the pit, from a top genius in everyone's eyes to a disabled person that had no soul power at all, to a person that everyone respected, and in awe to a poor man that no one pitied. He was bullied and tortured. Everything was in the test of fate. The test was testing his mind. The transformation at heart allowed one to detach from worldly views, become open-minded, and accept everything. Then one could see through the fog before his eyes and return to the peak. Otherwise, they would be doomed forever. Just like real God Wu Bei, when he was going through the test, he once went mad. If it wasn't because he had received a warm welcome at his last stage and barely maintained an open heart, he wouldn't be able to go through his third inverse cultivation test. Even if he passed through it, he would be drastically different in disposition. But Jian Wushuang was different. From the change of mind during the 3,000 years in Lineage of Star to when he had first got to Qing Tian, Mystery Land, and saw Chen village being massacred and turned into an ocean of blood, he nearly went mad too. He might as well have stayed in Rising Sun Palace for a dozen years. He had lived his life of sweeping floor calmly for a dozen years, and his heart was finally at peace. It was truly peaceful, like an old well with no ripples. Then he turned into Wu Chen and blended into a commoner's life. He was open-hearted with everything. Do what one finds satisfactory. Do what one pleases. Everything went according to fate. After thousands of years, even though he looked pathetic in many's eyes, Jian Wushuang was calm and unaffected. Maintaining his attitude, he turned into a stone block and reached the last step. He used a total of 13,000 years in the last step. He turned into a stone block on the peak of the mountain and towered there for 13,000 years. Finally, he woke up. Jian Wushuang. King of Venomous Worm's voice suddenly was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. 3,000 years in Lineage of Star, 5,000 years of walking in Qing Tian, Mystery Land, and 13,000 years as a stone block. In total, it was 21,000 years. This 21,000 years, every year, every day, every hour, even every breath is a test, but you didn't disappoint me. Congratulations! From today onwards, you already possess the qualifications to stand at the top of eternal chaotic world, King of Venomous Worms said, and his voice was obviously boiling with excitement. He himself had been constantly looking for information about the third inverse cultivation test. He had been living in worry for the past years, until then, when he had found out that Jian Wushuang finally passed the third inverse cultivation test, and he could once again be at ease. Then he was naturally thrilled. Once he had passed the third inverse cultivation test, Jian Wushuang's potential became extraordinary. To Lineage of Star, it of course brought unbelievably great benefits. Soon, Hall Master Yuan calmed down and asked, Jian Wushuang, as you've passed through the third inverse cultivation test, your power should have increased tremendously, right? Power. Jian Wushuang laughed. Every single inversion cultivation test that he had passed through had brought about a transformation with tremendous changes. His transformation during the third inverse cultivation test was the greatest, and his power had increased at terrifying speed. Hall Master Yuan, my power did increase on a huge scale, but if I don't fight with anyone, I can't gauge to what level my power has reached, Jian Wushuang replied. Is that so? Hall, Master Yuan understood. Hall, Master Yuan, I shall return to lineage of star now. I'll discuss it with you in detail after I come back. Jian Wushuang said. No, you don't have to rush back. Hall Master Yuan shook his head. Why not? Jian Wushuang was shocked. Jian Wushuang, I have something to tell you. Hall Master Yuan's face grew solemn. 30 years ago, there was an incident that happened at Four Symbol Land in Colored Glaze Sanctuary. A universe god killed an outstanding core disciple of Four Symbol Mansion at Four Symbol Land before all cultivators. The Four Symbol Mansion was curious and started chasing after the universe god. Just that. What does it have to do with me? Jian Wushuang looked confused. Of course, it's related to you, because the universe god who chased after was the top genius that wandered with you in Wu Bei's cave, and the one very close to you, Duan Lingfeng. What? Jian Wushuang's face suddenly changed. Duan Lingfeng. Duan Lingfeng was being hunted. How is he doing now? Jian Wushuang asked closely as he grew anxious. He stepped foot into eternal chaotic world for more than tens of thousands of years. During the years, he had a few close friends, like Fiery Qing, Ling Feibai, and him. However, among his close friends, the one who had really been through life and death situations with him and shared a tight-knitted relationship like brothers was really just one person. And that person was Duan Lingfeng. Back when he had first met Duan Lingfeng in Ancient Stars Sea long ago, Duan Lingfeng, and he had joined forces to kill a peak universe god in the third heaven from Sky-Devouring clan. Later, in Wu Bei's cave, when they met again, they had also joined forces to deal with one dangerous situation after another. In the end, Duan Lingfeng had even given him a white blaze fruit tree directly. Back then, Jian Wushuang asked him to not reject him if he were to need any favor from him in the future. Jian Wushuang had also promised that, as long as it didn't violate his principles, he wouldn't refuse under any circumstances. Then he found out that Duan Lingfeng was being chased after for the past 30 years. How could he not be worried? Chapter 1573, Four Symbol Mansion. Chapter 1573, Four Symbol Mansion. Don't worry. Although Duan Lingfeng's current situation is terrible, his life is not in danger, Hall Master Yuan said. That's good. Jian Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief, and he calmed down immediately. He then asked, Hall Master Yuan, what's going on? I am not sure of the details myself. However, Duan Lingfeng has indeed killed that core disciple of the Four Symbol Mansion in front of everyone. The Four Symbol Mansion is the overlord of the Four Symbol Land, and its position is similar to the lineage of stars in the Starland. If the core disciples under them were unfortunate and killed while training in the outside world, they could only blame their disciples for being too weak and not anyone else. Hence, the Four Symbol Mansion would not go out of their way to kill the other party in order to avenge their core disciples. For example, when Wu Bei's cave appeared back then, many universe gods died. Among the universe gods who died, some of them were disciples of some big sects and big powerhouses. However, since they were killed by others in a fair competition for the white blaze fruits, the big sects and big powerhouses could not say anything. But now Duan Lingfeng has killed the core disciple of the Four Symbol Mansion under the nose of the Four Symbol Mansion in the Four Symbol Land. Due to this, the Four Symbol Mansion got furious, and they immediately sent out experts under them to kill Duan Lingfeng. Fortunately, Duan Lingfeng himself is powerful, and his ability to keep himself alive is quite decent as well. Hence, even though he was chased around by many experts, he still managed to escape to the Burning Demon region. Burning Demon region? Jian Wushuang was stunned. The Burning Demon region was left behind by an almighty a long time ago. Although many years have passed and many opportunities and treasures were plundered, many different kinds of seal still existed in the burning demon region. There are both weak and powerful seals, as well as seals that are useful for hiding. In any case, there are so many seals that it is uncountable. After Duan Lingfeng escaped to the burning demon region, he probably found a place to hide himself. For the past years, the experts of the Four-Symbol Mansion have been searching for him in the burning demon region. However, up till now, they were still unable to find him. Furthermore, the Four-Symbol Mansion also posted an extravagant reward of 1,000 million chaos gems, and this has attracted quite a number of real gods within the Four-Symbol Land to join the search for Duan Lingfeng in the burning demon region. With so many experts looking, no matter how well Duan Lingfeng hides himself, he will be found by someone eventually, Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang's expression turned grave. He could tell that although Duan Lingfeng himself was all right, his situation was very bad. The moment his hiding place was found by someone, he would be besieged by a large number of experts from the Four-Symbol Mansion. As a universe god, no matter how strong Duan Lingfeng was, he would definitely be unable to stop so many experts. When the lineage of Star obtained this piece of news previously, we acted immediately. After all, Duan Lingfeng is your good friend, and he also gave you that white blaze fruit tree back then. The lineage of Star owes him a favor, and if we could help, we would naturally help. However, that place is ultimately the Four-Symbol Mansion's territory. Hence, over there, the lineage of Star is restricted in every sense, and we cannot do anything at all. I have even sent Lei Chao over personally. However, Lei Chao could only stay at the edge of the Four-Symbol Land. As soon as he makes a move to help Duan Lingfeng, his actions will definitely cause him to clash with the Four-Symbol Mansion head-on immediately. Even though Lei Chao is an expert in the real god ranking list, confronting the Four-Symbol Mansion within the Four-Symbol Land head-on was too risky. As such, we did not do anything up till now, Hall Master Yuan said. After listening, Jian Wushuang nodded his head. He also knew that the lineage of Star had many scruples, and he could understand. Jian Wushuang, the lineage of Star is unable to take action openly in this matter. However, you are different, Duan Lingfeng, and you are good friends in both life and death. Since everyone knows this clearly, it would be reasonable for you to take action. With this, the Four-Symbol Mansion would be unable to put the blame on the lineage of Star. Moreover, you have just cleared the inverse cultivation test for the third heaven, and your abilities have risen greatly. Therefore, you should be able to help Duan Lingfeng, Hall Master Yuan said. I understand. I will now head to the Four-Symbol Land, Jian Wushuang said. Okay, Hall Master Yuan also nodded his head and said, remember this, although Duan Lingfeng is your good friend, and you should rescue him, if there is really no choice, you must give up on him. I will absolutely not give up on him. Jian Wushuang shook his head without hesitation. Even then, he still remembered the words that Duan Lingfeng had said back in Wu Bei's cave when Zi Dongwang, Xianju, and the rest of people came to kill him. From the start of my training until now, I do not have many friends. However, Jian Wushuang is one of them. If all of you want to kill him, then that is equivalent to wanting to kill me as well. Jian Wushuang had remembered his words thoroughly. Although the situation back then had not reached the stage where he had no other alternative, Jian Wushuang was still touched. After hearing Jian Wushuang's words, Hall Master Yuan forced a smile and said immediately, all right, after you reach there, you should get in touch with Lei Chao. I have instructed him to wait outside the burning demon region. If you really reach a stage where you have no choice, you can send a message to him, and he will act straight away. No matter what The lineage of Star will not allow anything to happen to you, even if we have to shed all pretense of cordiality with the four-symbol mansion and have a big fight with them." "Understood. Thank you very much." Jian Wushuang laughed with gratitude. However, he understood very well in his mind. Sending a message to Lei Chao would be his last resort if he really had no other choice. Unless necessary, he would not get the lineage of Star involved. Jian Wushuang increased his speed and headed for the four-symbol land at once. After passing through the wormhole of the island, Jian Wushuang arrived at the four-symbol land. After that, Jian Wushuang traveled at full speed. When he arrived at the edge of the burning demon region, a month had passed. Over the past month, Jian Wushuang also requested for Hall Master Yuan to relay information of the burning demon region to him continuously. It was really fortunate. The number of experts in the burning demon region had increased over the past 1 month. However, until then, no one had managed to find Duan Lingfeng. At that moment, Jian Wushuang took out Duan Lingfeng's transmission token. "Duan Lingfeng, tell me your current location." Jian Wushuang sent a message straight away. "Jian Wushuang, I heard that you have gone to a mystery land that many ordinary people live in, and now you have come out of that mystery land." Duan Lingfeng's voice was still indifferent. "That's right, I have come out. Moreover, I am currently right outside the burning demon region." Jian Wushuang said. "Burning demon region?" Duan Lingfeng's voice turned gloomy. "What did you come here for?" "You asked what I came here for." Jian Wushuang said furiously. "Cut the crap and tell me your location quickly." After muttering to himself for some time, Duan Lingfeng sent his current location. Jian Wushuang then took out the map of the burning demon region that Hall Master Yuan had sent him. The map had marked every corner of the burning demon region. At the same time, it also included the locations of a number of seals. However, there were still a small number of seals in the burning demon region that even the lineage of Star did not know of. In no time, Jian Wushuang found the place that Duan Lingfeng was at. Chapter 1574. Jian Wushuang is here. Chapter 1574. Jian Wushuang is here. It's here. Even lineage of Star didn't know that there was a secret trap here. No wonder the experts couldn't find him after so long. Jian Wushuang smiled and instantly sent Duan Lingfeng a message. "Just you wait. I'll rush over to meet up with you really quickly." Duan Lingfeng nodded faintly. Jian Wushuang immediately entered the burning demon region and flew in the direction where Duan Lingfeng was swiftly. On his way there, he met a lot of experts who were searching for Duan Lingfeng in burning demon region. These experts were also universe gods, but there was quite a number of real gods too. They saw Jian Wushuang too. "Isn't that Jian Wushuang? It's really him. How could it be? Didn't the rumors say that he lost all his power and became a disabled person? But from the looks of it, he has recovered all his power." The experts were astonished. Many years ago, Jian Wushuang's name had spread across 10 cultivation sanctuaries. Even though most of the experts in 10 cultivation sanctuaries never saw him in person, they at least watched the video or image of him launching an attack. Hence, they could recognize Jian Wushuang at first glance. Very soon, the news about Jian Wushuang arriving in burning demon region spread. The experts in burning demon region, who were searching for Duan Lingfeng, were shocked. After all, everyone knew that Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng were best friends. The experts who had seen Jian Wushuang said that he had plunged over, and there was a fluctuation of divine power. Hence, he most likely had already recovered his power. That's why he came to burning demon region, to help Duan Lingfeng to get out of the difficult situation. Four-Symbol Mansion received the update and instantly asked about it, with Hall Master Yuan in lineage of Star. Hall Master Yuan's reply was simple. Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng were best friends, and he definitely would lend a helping hand to his friend. There's nothing we, Lineage of Star, can do to stop him. If so, I hope Lineage of Star doesn't get involved. As for Jian Wushuang, we Four-Symbol Mansion will try to ensure his life. Of course, if he were to kill our experts in Four-Symbol Mansion, we Four-Symbol Mansion will kill him without hesitation, one of the higher-ups in charge in Four-Symbol Mansion said. No problem. Hall Master Yuan agreed straightforwardly, but wasn't worried about it. In Burning Demon Region, it was covered with countless volcanoes, and the territory covered a vast expanse. Jian Wushuang, who carried his sword on his back, was plunging forward at full speed. On the way, although he met experts in Four-Symbol Mansion, the experts in Four-Symbol Mansion didn't make it difficult for him. However, some tailed behind Jian Wushuang and wanted to find Duan Lingfeng through Jian Wushuang. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang was too fast. Any ordinary universe god, or even a void real god, couldn't keep up with his speed. Very soon, Jian Wushuang flew through the vast expanse, and he was close to where Duan Lingfeng was. Just then, Jian Wushuang suddenly lifted his head and saw at the end of his sight that two figures were charging over. He knew one of them. Jian Wushuang, we meet again. There was a burst of malicious laughter from the void ahead, and the two figures stopped before Jian Wushuang. One was a middle-aged man in red armor. The middle-aged man was carrying an axe on his back, and he was obviously a void real god, and he was quite powerful. As for the other person, he was a cold-looking, purple-haired man. It was Zi Dongwang, who had fought against Jian Wushuang in Wu Bei's cave previously. The malicious laughter belonged to him. Zi Dongwang was originally in the second place on Universe God ranking list, second to God-destroying Qing. However, after the fight in Wu Bei's cave, he had fallen to the fourth place, behind Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng. However, as Jian Wushuang had lost his power entirely before, his ranking on the Universe God ranking list had vanished. Hence, Zi Dongwang had returned to third place. Zi Dongwang stood in the void as he glared at Jian Wushuang. He felt Jian Wushuang's aura and the fluctuation of divine power in him. There was a glimpse of coolness in his eyes. It seems that your power has really recovered. Zi Dongwang was arrogant and unwilling to admit defeat. Back when he had found out that Jian Wushuang had lost all his power and become a disabled person, Zi Dongwang had been gratified by his misfortunes. He was thrilled by the fact that he had returned to the third place on Universe God ranking list. Then, Duan Lingfeng was facing life and death danger, and he immediately rushed over, not only for the 1 billion Chaos Gem bounty that Four-Symbol Mansion offered, but he also wanted to see Duan Lingfeng be killed with his own eyes. He harbored deep hatred against Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng. He wanted them to be dead. Zi Dongwang, I have other matters to attend to. I have no time to spare to talk nonsense with you. Move away. Jian Wushuang glared at Zi Dongwang before him with his pair of cold eyes. Go ahead if you want to leave. I will not stop you, Zi Dongwang sneered. Jian Wushuang moved without hesitation and detoured around Zi Dongwang to continue to plunge forward in the void. Zi Dongwang didn't stop him, but just as Jian Wushuang passed by him. Jian Wushuang definitely knows the location of Duan Lingfeng. Let's go. Let's follow behind him. We can definitely find Duan Lingfeng if we tail him. Zi Dongwang looked at the void real god, who carried an axe on his back next to him. Then they followed behind Jian Wushuang. The two of them were extraordinarily powerful and rather good at traveling speed. They could totally keep up to Jian Wushuang's speed. Looking at the two followers behind him, Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Zidongwang, I have no time for you. Go away. Jian Wushuang bellowed. Ha ha, Jian Wushuang, I didn't stop you. You can go wherever you like. As for if I want to follow you, that's my own business. Who are you to interfere? Zidongwang scoffed. Jian Wushuang immediately stopped and turned around to look at Zidongwang. Zidongwang immediately stopped too and looked at Jian Wushuang as they maintained a distance of more than 1,000 miles. Zidongwang, let me ask you one last time. Are you leaving or not? Jian Wushuang asked in a low voice. I'm not leaving. What can you do about me? Zidongwang teased. Forget about the fact that Jian Wushuang's power had recovered to his peak. Even so, Jian Wushuang at his peak was much stronger than him, but not that much stronger. Plus, there was a void real god who was extremely strong next to him. If they were to team up, they could totally fight evenly with Jian Wushuang, or even suppress Jian Wushuang. If so, what was there to be afraid of? That was what Zidongwang thought. However, what he didn't know was that Jian Wushuang's peak condition that he thought of had remained at the level 20,000 years ago when they were in Wu Bei's cave. But then 20,000 years later, Jian Wushuang already passed the third inverse cultivation test,